Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku, back with another fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Stood Up to His Limits. Now before starting, please give this video a like. And subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Midoriya sat in class studying while Aizawa slept in his sleeping bag at the front of the room. The entire classroom was quiet. The students knew better than to wake their homeroom teacher after the last time they had tried. The students of Class 1A were just behind the teacher's area and could see everything that happened. Bakugo suddenly stood and stormed toward Midoriya, insulting him and daring him to jump off the roof. Aizawa woke at the last bit and Bakugo continued to taunt Midoriya, claiming that Midoriya could not beat him or anyone from Class 1B. The provocation escalated when Bakugo unleashed an explosion that scattered Midoriya's study materials and tore his shirt, leaving him with a small scrape. Several pro-heroes Mike, Midnight, All Might, and Ectoplasm turned toward the commotion and began to move in. Midoriya rose, brushed himself off, and asked why Bakugo had attacked him. Aizawa prepared to use his quirk, which briefly immobilized the situation, and Bakugo shouted at Aizawa to keep it off. Aizawa's eyes were strained, so he deactivated his quirk. Bakugo made another explosion, and Midnight stepped forward to calm things down, but Midoriya asked for a moment. Mike announced that the class should leave the room while the adults sorted things out. As Bakugo readied another attack, Midoriya seized Bakugo's arm and sharply twisted. Bakugo shouted in pain. All Might and the others were taken aback that Midoriya had reacted so forcefully without activating his quirk. Aizawa suspected that Bakugo had overstepped and brought it on himself. The other students watched in stunned silence. Midoriya unleashed a torrent of frustration, saying he was sick of being bullied and of Bakugo's constant yelling and superiority. The classroom realized that Bakugo had been bullying him, and All Might appeared especially shaken that someone he had come to care for was being treated that way. Nizu watched the scene from his office and from old files, following the cameras in the classroom. Bakugo accused Midoriya of having anger issues, but Midoriya activated one for all briefly to 5% and confronted Bakugo about his behavior, calling out how Bakugo treated everyone. Bakugo lunged forward, and Midoriya struck him hard enough that Bakugo flew through a classroom wall and crashed into the corridor. Midoriya warned Bakugo not to call him a nerd again. Bakugo was unconscious on the floor. Midoriya moved to grab him by the shirt, but All Might stepped between them, calm and gentle, and said there was no need to continue hurting him. Midoriya released Bakugo and immediately apologized, admitting he had lost control because of how often Bakugo yelled at him. All Might walked over and held Midoriya in a consoling embrace while Aizawa instructed Class 1A to return to the dorms and take the rest of the day off. Aizawa asked Ectoplasm to take Bakugo to Recovery Girl for treatment. Aizawa's phone buzzed with a message from Nizu requesting that All Might and Midoriya come to his office, and Aizawa told them they needed to go. As they gathered, someone observed that Midoriya's physical condition was surprising. He could handle far more weight than expected and run at very high speeds even without activating his quirk. Midnight was so startled she fainted, and Mike quickly steadied her. All Might decided it was time to follow Nizu's summons. They entered Nizu's office together. Nizu greeted them warmly and, after some levity when Midoriya asked if he was going to be expelled, reassured him that he was not in danger of being kicked out. The teachers laughed and explained that Midoriya was the glue of the class, a natural leader who held everyone together. Aizawa praised Midoriya's willingness to protect his classmates and noted that even when teachers warned him against it, he always tried to save as many people as he could. Nizu continued, saying that because of Midoriya's leadership and the recent events, they wanted to give the class a break and some time to recover. He mentioned plans to arrange some rest for Bakugo as well. Then Nizu told Midoriya and All Might that he had a recorded file of Midoriya's fight against Overhaul that they had not yet seen and that he wanted them to watch it together. Nizu cued the footage so they could review the battle. All Might and Aizawa walked into the Class 1A dormitory. Uraraka asked if Deku was okay, and Deku nodded. Nizu explained cheerfully that neither Deku nor Bakugo would be expelled, because Deku wanted Bakugo to remain, and that they had gathered to review the recording of Deku's fight before discussing plans for the coming month. Nizu hopped off Aizawa, turned on the TV, and everyone sat down to watch. When the video began, Kirishima exclaimed that Deku's actions had been incredibly brave, and many of the girls blushed, admiring his courage. Aizawa noticed their reactions and allowed a small smile. Aizawa praised Deku for his performance, calling him reliable in his own gruff way. Kaminari joked that Deku could take on anything. Deku smiled and explained that he had used his full strength in that fight and believed he could push himself even further, which made the class react with a mixture of awe and concern. Todoroki made an offhand remark about the next UA Sports Day, and everyone took note. Deku hurried to clarify that he was normally operating at a much lower level and that he had only been able to reach his peak because of his motivation to protect Eri. Nizu beamed and addressed the room, acknowledging everyone present, including the Big Three and Eri, and teasing Aizawa a little. Aizawa flushed slightly and conceded the point. Mina teased lightly about romance, and Aizawa responded that he knew the students well and warned them not to get carried away. Nizu announced that the class would be taking the week off to prepare for their upcoming plans. Aizawa urged everyone to thank Deku, saying that without him they would not be Class 1A and the planned vacation would not be possible. The class called out their thanks in unison, leaving Deku a flustered, blushing mess as he tried to protest that it was unnecessary. Aizawa approached and quietly reminded him that he was their leader. Nizu gave Aizawa a brief, affectionate pat before excusing himself. All Might asked to speak with Deku outside. Once alone, All Might thanked him, embraced him, and told him that the footage of him saving Eri confirmed everything All Might had believed about his strength and character. It reassured the teachers that the class was in capable hands. All Might invited Deku and his mother to dinner so his mother could see how much her son had grown. Deku said he would check his mother's schedule, thinking she was usually free in the evenings. All Might told him to get ready and that he would make the arrangements. Deku hugged him and, to his own surprise, called All Might Dad before bolting off in embarrassment. All Might stood stunned and worried about how Inko might react. Back in Nizu's office, Nizu suggested finalizing the travel plans. Midnight burst in and asked to accompany Class 1A to Australia. Nizu approved the request, and Midnight left pleased. Aizawa questioned the decision, and Nizu explained that Midnight would serve as an additional chaperone and had a supportive interest in Deku's well-being. Aizawa laughed, and Nizu reassured him that everything would be fine and that Australia was safe. That evening Deku returned to his room, sighed, and reflected on how relieved he felt after confronting someone earlier. Standing up for himself had left him unexpectedly lightened. He changed into something comfortable and lay on his bed to rest. Meanwhile, the students began to plan a small surprise to thank Deku for everything he did. Ashido suggested they do something nice. Ida emphasized how much Deku meant to the class, and Momo added that he meant a great deal to his family. Sato offered to bake a cake. Momo organized the tasks. Sato would make the cake. Kirishima, Ashido, Kaminari, and Aoyama would set up the meeting area. Jiro would assemble a playlist. The rest would act as if nothing were happening so the surprise would not be spoiled. Momo and Ida would oversee safety and logistics. All Might called Inko from his office and nervously asked her not to be angry. Inko warned him sharply that if their son were hurt he would be in trouble. All Might explained that Deku had snapped at Bakugo and, in the aftermath, had called him father, prompting All Might to invite both Deku and Inko to dinner. Inko asked if Deku knew about the plan. All Might admitted he was not certain and asked when she was available. Inko said she was free on Friday and agreed to the dinner. All Might then mentioned that in a week the class would be heading to Australia for a month. Inko expressed confidence in their son's responsibility and agreed to the schedule. They arranged to meet on Friday, and after the call All Might was overcome with emotion and sat quietly under his desk. That night Deku fell asleep, and the next events began to take shape. It was afternoon. Deku was in his room wearing only boxers when Todoroki walked in, worried, and asked what had happened. Deku breathed heavily and admitted he did not know. Todoroki checked if he was all right. Deku caught his breath and said he needed to talk to All Might. Todoroki looked confused and asked why. Deku put on a shirt and shorts and said he simply needed to speak with him. They left together. Deku told Todoroki he would be out tonight because he would be babysitting Eri and Koda. Todoroki remarked that sounded like a long evening. Deku explained that after his talk with All Might he would go to the children's house to babysit. Todoroki asked what to tell other people. Deku rubbed the back of his head and asked Todoroki to say that he was out and that Todoroki did not know anything about the explosion. Todoroki nodded and said he would go eat now. Deku said goodbye, and Todoroki thought that Deku was a leader. As they descended the stairs, Deku called Aizawa. Aizawa answered and asked why he was being called. Deku, a little embarrassed, explained that he had been napping when his quirk activated and his room had a small accident. Aizawa sighed and asked how bad the damage was. Deku cheerfully said only a window had been broken. Aizawa was not angry and promised to take care of it before Deku returned that night. Deku added that he needed to babysit Eri and Kota today. Aizawa remembered and said it was fine and that he would fix things while Deku was gone. They ended the call. Aizawa thought to himself that the kid would give him a hard time. Deku walked into All Might's office and heard him quietly crying. He asked if All Might was crying. All Might stood and, wiping his eyes, said he was proud of how far Deku had come. Deku smiled, sat down, and asked if All Might had ever had dreams about One for All. All Might responded that he had never had such dreams. Deku then described a troubling dream in which he had seen Nana and the other past users of One for All standing beside him. All Might blinked and said that none of that had happened to him or his master. Deku looked down and explained that Nana had been there in the dream, along with the other past users. All Might admitted he did not know what to make of it. In Deku's head, Nana told him to tell All Might not to be sorry, and the first user said All Might had done well. Deku relayed those messages, saying Nana told All Might not to be sorry and the first user said he had done well. All Might asked if Deku was all right. Deku worriedly said he thought they were all in his head. Nana, in Deku's head, reassured him that they were there but would not make him lose his mind. They would only speak when he was in a fight or to make a quick comment. Deku confirmed that all of the former users were in his head. All Might, concerned, asked why they were talking to him. Nana explained that Deku would inherit quirks from the past users except the ones he already had. Deku reacted with worry and confusion at the idea of gaining more quirks. Nana and the others then listed the quirks Deku would receive. A floating ability, a quirk that could make someone feel the weight of death without causing harm, the ability to conjure fireballs, an anger-related quirk that could boost strength without draining stamina, and a transformation ability similar to becoming a wolf. Deku absorbed the news and asked how he would acquire them. Nana said they would appear to him in his dreams at night, and admitted they had accidentally caused the earlier room accident. Deku sighed and said he supposed they would come through his dreams. All Might worried that it would be a lot to train with, but Deku reassured him that it would be fine and asked when they would have dinner. All Might suggested Friday to include Deku's mother. Nana laughed in Deku's head for a moment, and Deku wondered what she was laughing about. All Might scolded Nana in a joking, exasperated way. The first user in Deku's head said he wanted Deku to find out on his own, and Nana relented. Someone opened a door nearby and apologized for the interruption, saying the others would take a step back. The door closed. Deku decided he was not going to get any more immediate answers and needed to go babysit. All Might smiled and told him to go and that he would see him later. Deku left. After Deku had gone, All Might sent a message to Inko saying they needed to tell Deku about the situation. Inko asked whether All Might meant that they needed to tell him or if All Might had already told him. All Might replied that he would be careful with how they explain things. Inko agreed, and they planned to discuss it further later. All Might sent a message suggesting that after they told him, they could do father and son time in Australia. Inko replied that Friday would be fine. All Might messaged again to confirm and said goodbye, adding that he loved her. Inko replied that she loved him too and said goodbye. Deku walked into the Year 3 dorm and heard Eri. He called out that he thought he heard his little snowball. Eri ran over and addressed him politely as Sir Deku. Mirio approached and asked if Deku had come to pick her up. Deku smiled and said that he had, and that he was also planning to take Kota to meet the wild pussycats. Tamaki remarked that another kid was coming along and praised Deku for being good with children. Hato agreed that Deku would make a good father someday. Deku blushed slightly and asked if they really thought so. Mirio tried not to laugh and thanked Deku for the trip to Australia. Deku brushed it off and said it was nothing, but he and Eri needed to leave. Eri smiled and agreed to go. Deku bade the three of them goodbye as he and Eri left the dorm. Mirio laughed as they went, and Tamaki teased that Deku would be a good father. Mirio laughed harder on the floor while Hato blushed and protested that she had not meant it like that. Mirio recovered his breath and teased that if he weren't wrong, someone else might be interested too. Mirio stood and suggested maybe Deku liked them. Nizu sat in his office and wondered aloud how Deku would keep everyone who liked him from fighting over him, chuckling to himself and thinking that there was one way he could manage it and that it would be interesting. Deku arrived at the Wild Pussycat's base carrying Eri and knocked on the door. Mandalay opened it and welcomed Deku warmly, delighted to see him and curious about the child in his arms. Eri introduced herself and said that Deku had saved her. Mandalay told Eri that it would be nice for her to go meet Kota. Eri looked frightened, and Deku reassured her that Kota would be kind and told her to be brave. Deku set Eri down and explained that he did not plan to leave her. He only wanted her to meet Kota so she would get to know him a little before they came together. Eri nodded and walked off. Mandalay giggled at the sight of Deku with a child and teased him about it. Deku rubbed the back of his head and admitted he could only smile. Mandalay playfully tapped him and told him to apologize for scaring them earlier. Deku walked into the kitchen and apologized for not realizing they had seen what happened. Pixie Bob exclaimed that they had definitely seen the fight and thought it had been exciting. Ragdoll picked up a toy water gun and playfully sprayed Pixie Bob, who shouted back at Ragdoll as Mandalay tried to calm them down. Deku walked over to Tiger and asked if they always acted like this. Tiger sighed and nodded, asking if Deku wanted him to stop. Deku smiled and said he would wait, as he wanted to see how Kota and Eri were getting along. Tiger told Deku that they had explained what happened to Eri to Kota and that Kota understood. Deku thanked him. Tiger and Deku walked in and took a picture of Kota and Eri together, which Deku sent to the parents group that included Aizawa, the Wild Pussycats, the Big Three and Ms. Joke. Ms. Joke reacted with excitement and asked if Aizawa had seen it. Aizawa responded with exasperation, joking about how to handle it, and others reassured him that Deku had saved the child. Pixie Bob found the scene adorable, and Ragdoll teased that Kota might have a crush. Aizawa expressed disbelief at the idea, and Ms. Joke apologized for the chaos. Tiger looked at his phone and remarked that Aizawa might be exasperated enough to be dramatic about it. Deku smiled, unconcerned. Kota looked up toward Tiger and Deku and asked how long they had been there. Tiger smiled and said it was not long, then winked, which embarrassed Kota. Eri asked how Kota knew Deku, and Kota replied that Deku had saved him. Eri apologized if her questions were inappropriate, and Kota reassured her that it was okay. If he had not met Deku, he might not have had the chance to meet Eri either. Tiger and Deku exchanged a knowing look and thought that Kota had been smooth. The Wild Pussycats gathered, and Eri said she was glad to meet Kota. Everyone noticed Kota blushing hard when Deku talked to a girl. Pixie Bob asked Kota if he liked Eri. Kota stammered that she was nice to talk to. The others nodded, and Tiger reminded Kota that they needed to leave soon and asked him to behave. Kota looked away shyly and promised he would. Mandalay reminded everyone that Kota needed to be in bed by 6 so he would not be tired the next day. Deku agreed he would make sure of it. Kota grumbled, puzzled about why another trip to the shops was necessary. Mandalay explained that Nizu wanted everyone to go away for a month to Australia. Deku told the group that Class 1A, the Big Three, Eri, Aizawa, Ms. Joke, Midnight, and All Might would be going to Australia for a month, and Pixie Bob reacted loudly at Nizu's planning. Nizu sat back, thinking he would take the heat now but be thanked later. Mandalay sighed and accepted that they were all going together. Ragdoll, Pixie Bob, and Mandalay exchanged playful comments about seeing Deku in swimwear, which brought teasing smiles. Tiger wondered how the trip would go for the kids. Deku rubbed the back of his head and told the others that he would be fine and that they needed to go. He would take care of everything. Pixie Bob smiled and said they would see him later, and Pixie Bob winked as Ragdoll walked out teasingly about being 30. Mandalay apologized for earlier, and Deku waved it off, reassuring her that it was fine and goodbye. As Mandalay left, Tiger offered that if anyone wanted a drink they could go to his room. Deku hesitated but accepted, and Tiger reminded them to not overdo it before closing the door. Once they were alone, Deku looked between Koda and Eri and suggested watching a movie. Koda agreed happily, and Eri brightened at the idea. Deku asked what to watch. Koda said he did not mind, and Eri proposed Frozen, which everyone agreed on. Halfway through the film, Koda and Eri fell asleep. Eri rested against Deku's lap. Deku quietly took a photo and sent it to the parents' group chat. Aizawa replied that he was not happy about the photo but admitted it was cute. Jiro messaged that he had always known Deku had a heart. Tiger reacted warmly, and Mario made a teasing remark about Tamaki and Heido. Deku responded with an embarrassed reaction. After settling Koda and Eri, Deku made sure they were comfortable and then returned to the common room. Nana joined him there, and when Deku admitted he had been startled thinking someone was locked up, she laughed and said that would not be fun. The common room was quiet, and Deku felt uneasy as he approached the door. Worrying that the others might be waiting as a surprise, Deku engaged one for all at 5% and kicked the door in. He immediately heard voices say thank you, and he almost reacted instinctively but stopped, deactivating his quirk. Looking around, Deku saw the common room filled with Class 1A, the Big Three, the teachers, Mei Hatsum, Miss Joke, and a large cake decorated with a Deku theme. Aizawa stepped forward to explain that they were all there to thank him for everything he had done for them. Deku was confused and insisted that he had done nothing special. Aizawa reminded him firmly of the many times Deku had saved Class 1A and helped others from intervening on the first day that prevented expulsions to assisting at the training camp, supporting the wild pussycats, helping teachers, protecting Miss Joke's class, and bringing Eri to safety. Aizawa said that Deku had done so much that they wanted to express their gratitude. Deku glanced around at everyone and protested that they did not need to do this, that he was only doing what felt right. Aizawa sighed and acknowledged how Deku always pushed himself. He recalled how Deku had stood out during the ball-throwing demonstration back at UA, and said that, because of what Deku had done, he had come to genuinely like the class. Mike and Midnight reacted in exaggerated shock that Aizawa could be so affected by students, while Aizawa admitted that the class had given him hope for the future. Class 1A declared that Aizawa did care for them. The Big Three credited Deku with saving them, noting that his intervention against Overhaul had been life-saving. Deku awkwardly placed a hand at the back of his head and insisted he had only been doing the right thing. Tiger reminded him that he had also saved the wild pussycats at the training camp and, most importantly, had looked out for Koda. Deku brushed it off, saying it had not been that difficult. Principal Nizu then spoke quietly and revealed that Deku had come perilously close to dying during some of those encounters. The room reacted with shock, but Deku laughed nervously and insisted that he was fine. Aizawa, upset and worried, asked why Deku had not told him sooner. Deku downplayed it as not important, and Nizu explained that they had seen what had happened because of the recording of the Overhaul incident. Nizu invited everyone to sit. The students and teachers took their seats while Deku quietly moved to the back, keeping his distance from Aizawa. A projected video began to play, bringing the gathering to a close and offering the tribute they had prepared. Deli gulped and told everyone that before anyone objected he had been completely in control during the fight. Aizawa moved quickly and admonished Deku for nearly dying. Deku responded cheerfully that he had only almost died. Madalari sighed and noted that after nearly dying he had still come to rescue her, Tiger, and a few classmates. Deku nodded in agreement. All Might smiled and warned that when they returned he would make Deku train twice as hard. Deku accepted that. Kirishima, excited, remarked that the rescue had been brave and wondered why Deku had not gone to get help. Deku explained that he could not. The pro-heroes were already dealing with other villain members and both Class 1A and 1B were occupied with other conflicts. Nizu smiled and told Deku he had made the right choice, noting that staying in the fight while injured and with a child present would have risked hurting more people. Deku thanked him. Momo smiled and said they could celebrate now. Nothing important happened at the party. After everyone returned to their dorms, Deku was about to go to his when All Might called him outside. Deku stepped out and asked why All Might had wanted to see him. All Might embraced him, relief and tears showing, and asked why he had risked himself like that. Deku returned the hug and reassured All Might that he believed he had done the right thing. All Might admitted he understood but confessed constant worry about Deku's body and pleaded with him not to keep pushing himself so hard. Deku broke the hug and promised All Might he would take better care of himself. All Might smiled, told him to get some sleep, and wished him good night. Deku headed to his dorm determined to think of a way to thank everyone. Alone in his room, Deku made a mental list of personal, respectful tokens of thanks for each friend and teacher. He chose a small gesture for All Might that he hoped his mentor would appreciate. He picked something simple for Ojiro, a playful idea to tease Todoroki, and a formal, thoughtful gesture for Ida despite knowing it might draw a scolding. He imagined Kirishima enjoying something bold, planned a calm and considerate gift for Fumikage, and worried briefly about how Momo might receive her token before deciding to keep it tasteful and sincere. He continued through the list. A friendly surprise for Denki, a considerate plan for Aizawa, and an encouraging note for Uraraka. He selected a practical item for Koda and a helpful present for Shoji. He pictured an upbeat tribute for Mirio and chose a brave but respectful offering for Midnight, accepting that some choices made him nervous but were worth the effort. For Tamaki and Sato he settled on light-hearted, comforting gestures. He hesitated at Jiro, felt a flutter of nerves, and then received gentle encouragement from Nana, who teased that his list showed how much he cared for his classmates. Deku smiled inwardly and kept going. He added Siro and Mina, piecing together friendly, appropriate ideas, and selected a modest, useful token for Azui. A short chat with Nana suggested Yuga next, and Deku found the right way to close his list of thanks. With his plan arranged, Deku felt relieved and more at ease. He went to bed determined to follow through on his quiet, heartfelt way of thanking everyone for their support. Deku was happy and tired. He explained that he was done with his work but still needed to burn all the CDs by tomorrow. He changed into a t-shirt and boxers and went to bed. He woke the next morning when Kiri kicked the door open, calling for Deku to get up because they were going to the mall. Half asleep, Deku agreed that he was up. Kiri punched the door down the rest of the way and urged him to hurry. Aizawa entered with a sigh and remarked that he would have to fix the door later and that Deku should put some proper pants on. Deku asked for someone to toss him some jeans. Kiri threw a pair, Deku put them on, and he announced that he was ready. Deku walked into the common room and found the other boys gathered. Denki encouraged everyone to get going. At the mall, the group split into smaller sets. Deku went with Kiri, Denki, and Ida. Kiri excitedly said that everything would be fun. Deku smiled and reminded them to relax and not get into trouble. Ida said he was only coming because there weren't too many rules here. That night, on Tuesday, Deku sat on his bed feeling tired but remembering that he had to babysit Eri and Koda again. He thought about the music CDs and hesitated over when to give them. Nana suggested giving them the CDs that night but joked that Deku might sneak them onto the door instead. Deku admitted that he was worried about giving them face to face. He did not want an awkward moment if they played the music in front of him. Lita knocked on his door to say that Mr. Aizawa wanted to address the class. Deku and Lita went down together. Aizawa announced that Miss Joke would be taking over as teacher for the moment and teased that it might be annoying. Miss Joke responded playfully that calling it annoying was too harsh and seemed pleased with the change. Aizawa protested that he would never date her, but Deku teased him when Aizawa began to blush. Miss Joke kept up her playful banter, and Aizawa, resigned and smiling, reminded Deku that he had babysitting to do. Deku promised to visit Aizawa's office later. Aizawa warned him that he would be dragged in if he did not show up. The class laughed until Aizawa used his quirk to quiet them, then he carried Miss Joke on his shoulder for a moment, thinking that Deku was clever. Deku knocked on the agency home and Pixie Bob answered the door, surprised to see him for babysitting. Deku confirmed that he was there because Eri wanted to see Koda. Eri brightened and rushed to hug Koda. Koda blushed a little and greeted her politely. Eri beamed that she was happy to see him. Pixie Bob raised an eyebrow but kept quiet and stepped back to let the kids choose a movie. Deku suggested they pick something fun, and Eri said they should watch Moana. He told them to start watching while he prepared dinner. Inside, Deku greeted Ragdoll and Mandalay. Ragdoll mentioned they had just seen the two kids walking by together, smiling at the innocent moment. Mandalay offered Deku a place to stay that night, but Deku explained that he needed to return to UA or else Aizawa would be upset, and he had early morning training. Mandalay acknowledged that they would be fine and noted other scheduling plans. Tiger offered to drive Deku back and said they would need to get dressed for the night ahead. When Deku asked what time they would leave, Tiger said 3 in the morning. Ragdoll explained that there were dangerous meetings that night, the kind of trouble that happened every Wednesday, and the adults reminded each other to be prepared and careful. Mandalay apologized for the rough business and went to get ready, promising they would come say goodbye to the kids. Deku returned to Koda and Eri. Koda complimented Eri on how pretty she looked, and Eri returned the compliment with equal sincerity. Deku asked what movie they wanted, and they chose Moana. He smiled and went to start making dinner. Deku moved to the kitchen. Tiger walked in and explained that the main reason he was driving Deku back to UA was that it was not far and Deku needed to get back a bit early. Deku sighed in defeat and agreed. Tiger patted him on the back and asked what he was making. Deku hesitated and considered soba or homemade pizza. Tiger preferred soba because he did not want the kids making pizza, and Deku agreed. Ragdoll appeared and told them to leave the kid alone. Pixie Bob arrived behind her and made a teasing remark, and Deku flushed. Ragdoll reminded Pixie Bob that Deku was only 16. Mandalay arrived and scolded Pixie Bob for pushing things too far. Pixie Bob stayed sassy, and Tiger suggested they say goodbye to the kids. They all went inside. Mandalay told Koda that they were leaving, and Koda waved goodbye. Pixie Bob kissed Koda on the cheek and asked him to be good to Eri and Deku. Ragdoll kissed him on the cheek and promised they would be back later that night. Tiger patted Koda on the head, and Koda wiped his cheek and returned their goodbyes. Deku walked them to the door and observed that the children would probably be asleep before they got home. Pixie Bob hoped he would be awake when they came back, and Ragdoll reminded her to behave and get in the car. Pixie Bob and Ragdoll climbed in. Mandalay followed and asked Tiger to drive. Tiger shrugged apologetically and left with them. Deku waved them off and assured them he had everything under control. Tiger reminded him of the same rules as before. Deku rolled his eyes. Tiger warned the trio not to cause trouble. Mandalay insisted she did not have an interest and that it was mostly Pixie Bob joking around, but Tiger said he had overheard them talking at night and sounded exasperated. Ragdoll said Mandalay was supposed to help keep Pixie Bob in check. Mandalay admitted he thought Deku was cute. Tiger scolded Ragdoll for having tried to ask him out in the mirror. Pixie Bob and Mandalay teased Ragdoll until she reluctantly admitted she liked him. Tiger expressed his disappointment in their behavior. He cautioned that many girls in Deku's class had crushes on him and that Midnight was also popular, so they should be careful. Pixie Bob then made an impudent remark, and the car fell silent. Tiger told them to stop, and they drove away. Deku returned to where Eri and Koda were, and asked what kind of soba they wanted. Eri asked for beef, and Koda happily agreed to the same. Deku nodded and began making beef soba. After dinner, Deku cleared the plates and announced that they would watch one more movie before bed. Koda and Eri agreed, and Deku hoped they would fall asleep during the film. Nana, faintly present in his head, said she hoped so too. Deku wondered how Nana had a soda. Nana admitted she did not know. Someone off-screen urged Nana back inside, and after a brief hesitation she complied. Deku checked the children's rooms, put on soft music, and returned to the living room to find Eri asleep with his head on Deku's lap. Deku took a photo and sent it to the group chat. In the chat, Seven messaged that the kids were adorable. Aizawa texted that Deku should take Eri to bed now. Joke teased that Aizawa was jealous, and Aizawa brushed it off. Deku joked that Eri needed a mother figure. Aizawa warned him he would be in trouble when he returned that night. Joke argued that Eri might benefit from a maternal presence and suggested Midnight might not be the best match for that role. Aizawa asked them to drop the subject. Deku told Aizawa he would not be home until around 3. Aizawa replied that he would probably be asleep by then and arranged for someone from the Big Three to pick up Eri so Deku could return to his dorm. Deku acknowledged the plan. Around 3 in the morning, Tiger returned. Deku asked if everyone was all right. Tiger nodded and said they were fine, just tired from the night. Pixie Bob thanked Deku for watching the children and said she needed sleep. Ragdoll agreed. Mandalay thanked Deku for making dinner for the kids. Deku said it had been no trouble and urged them to get some rest. Deku picked up Eri to hand him over. Tiger suggested they head to UA. Tiger reminded Deku that a lot of people liked him and to handle any attention respectfully. Deku asked if Tiger was joking, and Tiger said he was not. He advised Deku to be mindful. Deku protested that he did not think everyone liked him, and Tiger reassured him he would find out in time. They arrived at UA. Tiger waved and told Deku he would see him Monday. Deku got out of the car, picked Eri up from his seat, and headed inside. Deku thanked All Might for the ride home and entered UA, where All Might and Nizu greeted him. All Might sighed and said he had been told about the little voices Deku carried in his head. Nizu smiled and asked how Deku managed them. Deku explained that it was mostly Nana and the one other user who talked to him, and that they usually retreated to the back of his mind and did not cause trouble. Nizu accepted that as long as they were not making an issue. Deku said he would take Eri back and then go to his dorm. All Might offered to accompany him, but Deku declined, saying it was not far. Nizu suggested Deku use his quirk to get there quickly. Deku switched his quirk to 8% and began running with Eri. All Might wondered aloud if Deku could manage it, and Nizu expressed confidence that he would succeed. All Might reflected that he had trained Deku hard and that the break was deserved. Nizu praised Deku's courage and determination, and All Might noted Deku's remarkable combination of strength and heart. The two shared a fond, teasing exchange about his qualities. Nizu leapt playfully onto All Might before they parted, and All Might walked away smiling. Deku arrived at the Big Three dorm and found Nijire awake. Nijire greeted him warmly while he handed Eri over. Deku reassured Nijire that Eri had been an angel and asked if she could keep Eri until Monday. Nijire confirmed that they would all be there until then. Deku said he would come by for training on Saturday and politely declined Nijire's offer to stay the night. After Nijire went to her room, Deku placed music on several doors throughout the dorm area and then returned to his room. He sat in the common room and hoped that everyone would like the surprise. At 4:30 a.m. Deku debated whether to watch TV or go to the gym and chose the gym. By 6:30 a.m., he headed to the kitchen and decided to make breakfast for everyone before going to sleep. Nana watched him work and asked how he was not tired. Deku had no clear answer, but he continued cooking pancakes, eggs, bacon, French toast, and sausages, preparing 18 plates in all. He plated 3 eggs, some bacon, toast, for sausages, and 2 pieces of French toast for each setting, left a short note explaining he had babysat Eri and Koda and then hit the gym, and mentioned that he would probably be passed out by the time they read it. Soon everyone came downstairs and followed the smell to the table. Mina exclaimed about how good everything smelled, and Momo agreed. The students were surprised and delighted by the spread. Ida wondered who had stayed up to make breakfast. Kirishima picked up Deku's note and read aloud that Deku hoped they had slept well and had prepared breakfast because he had just returned from babysitting and the gym, and that he wanted the food to help if the music alone was not enough. Jiro asked what Deku had meant by the music, and Momo said she did not know but that they should eat. After everyone enjoyed the meal, Mina wondered why Deku had never cooked for them before, and Toru said it tasted so good she could eat it every day. Jiro returned to her room and found a small card on her door indicating that music for her had been made by Deku. She took it down and came downstairs to tell everyone that Deku had placed music on their doors. The others looked confused, and then they went to check their doors to see what he had left. The students rushed to the room, excited and breathless. Someone announced that he had done it and urged everyone to grab the music. They returned to the room, buzzing with curiosity. Denki asked whether he could sing. Momo produced a music player and said they would find out. Aizawa and Midnight entered with the rest of the pro heroes. Aizawa asked where the student in question was. Shoto explained that Midoriya was asleep. Aizawa sighed and asked whether the music had been shared with the rest of the class. Everyone nodded. Midnight made a teasing remark about the boy having given them music. Aizawa warned her off, and the members of the Wild Pussycats filed in. Mandalay noted that she had received music too. May and the others arrived, all curious. Aizawa asked who wanted to go first. Momo volunteered. When Momo's song finished, everyone was stunned that Midoriya had such a voice. Said she liked the song, and Aizawa agreed that it fit her personality. He announced that he would go next. After Aizawa's turn, the class joked that they would blame the student for everything. Am asked if they could play his song. Aizawa allowed it. The performances continued, and the students grew more and more bewildered at how they had never heard this voice before. Jiro admitted that Midoriya had not said anything at the concert. Momo patted her back and reminded her that he had been nervous. Midnight asked to play her track next, and Aizawa agreed. The big three arrived with Eri. Mirio confirmed that they had all received music as well. As the first notes of one song played, the younger students clustered around Eri and Koda protectively. Aizawa watched, surprised, while some of the girls reacted with a mix of embarrassment and amusement. Midnight smirked, appearing entertained, and covered his face in disbelief. When that song ended, Aizawa admitted he had not expected such personal-sounding pieces. Expressed concern in a light-hearted way. Mina suggested they play another song. Tamaki and the others took their turns, and by the end the class had learned more surprises. Midoriya's recordings included beatboxing and a rapid rap. Mina shouted in amazement at the beatboxing, and Aizawa confessed he had not known Midoriya could do that. Observed that it seemed nobody else had known. Mirio performed and laughed about the song choice, enjoying it despite its mismatch. Nijire blushed after her song and commented that it was a very nice melody. Several students wondered whether many of the tracks sounded like personal dedications or flattering verses tailored to each listener. Aizawa suggested they invite the Wild Pussycats to perform. They agreed. Tiger came up next, and after the song everyone commented on how good Midoriya's voice was. Pixie Bob made a playful remark, and Rag Doll splashed a little water at her in jest. Aizawa called for Rag Doll's turn. He considered the possibility that Midoriya had selected songs that reflected each person's personality, as if wanting to make everyone feel special. After Rag Doll's performance there was a brief moment of confusion. Some wondered whether Midoriya truly thought of them in the ways the songs suggested. Mandalay performed and felt her heart beat faster afterward. Koda asked, in his simple childlike way, whether Midoriya would become their new dad. Mandalay gently explained that she was too old for that and that the songs seemed intended to make the girls feel included rather than to indicate anything romantic. The younger students accepted the explanation and the next song began. Denki cheered after his song and Aizawa called for Shiro. Shiro opened a note he had found inside his player that explained the song might be a rap, and he decided to go for it. When Shiro finished, the class was shocked at how fast and skilled the rap was. Aizawa marveled at how Midoriya's voice could fit so many styles without missing a beat. Ida explained that people who spoke quickly sometimes made rhythms pop, and Aizawa agreed that Midoriya had managed to stay composed while performing. Ida sang next, and everyone laughed at the cleverness of his track. He decided he needed to keep it. Aizawa then called for Shoto. Shoto performed a piece that captured his reserved personality, and Uraraka tried not to laugh when someone teased that the song fit him well. Shoto admitted that he tended to be composed and quiet. Uraraka asked him whether he wanted the blunt truth or a kinder answer to a question about his appearance. Shoto chose the truth and the class affirmed it in good humor. Aizawa moved the order along and asked for Uraraka's song. After she listened, Uraraka was thoughtful and a little surprised. She suspected that Midoriya liked her as a friend and that the song had emphasized the value of their friendship. The other girls glanced at one another and privately hoped they might mean the same to him. Throughout the session, each performance revealed a different facet of Midoriya's taste and talent. The songs had been chosen with care, often highlighting personality traits and offering warm, personal messages rather than anything overtly romantic or inappropriate. As the night went on, the class grew closer, amused and moved by the unexpected way their quiet classmate had reached out to everyone through music. Aizawa sighed and told the class that it was Momo's turn. After the first words, they covered Eri and Koda, and Momo looked confused. When Momo finished her song, Aizawa looked down in surprise. Mina walked over to Momo and asked if she was all right. Momo nodded and said she was fine, and Aizawa called for Jiro next. After Jiro's performance, She wondered if he actually thought she looked good and worried about her appearance. Mina then insisted it was her turn, and Aizawa agreed. While Mina heard the class listening happily, she wondered if anyone liked her, then quickly shook off the thought. There was an awkward mood, and Mina told herself to move on. Toru asked if it was his turn next, and Aizawa told him to hurry. After Toru's song, everyone complimented his performance. Tsuyu was called second to last, and after her song she wondered whether anyone appreciated her for who she was. She reassured herself that it would be fine. Aizawa announced the last performer as Mei. Mei's song left her thinking about how she felt toward the listener and how nervous she had been during the performance. Aizawa then dismissed the class and told them to head back to their dorms to train or go to lunch. As everyone left, all the girls quietly wondered whether Deku liked any of them. Aizawa and All Might stood outside Deku's room debating whether to wake him or let the girls approach him in the morning. All Might suggested leaving Deku asleep so the girls could see him later, and Aizawa admitted he had no better plan. The next morning Deku woke at 5:30 and decided to make breakfast. He prepared the same dishes as the day before, left a note for the class, took some toast, and went for a run. When everyone came down for breakfast, they found Deku's note explaining that he had gone for a run after already having breakfast, and that they should help themselves. Mina read the note aloud to the others and said it was sweet that he had thought of them. Kirishima cheered that he was very impressive, and Ida smiled and told the class to eat. After breakfast Deku returned and greeted everyone. The class thanked him for the songs and Deku was surprised to hear they had liked them so much. He explained that singing had come from spending a lot of time alone and that he had learned to cook because his mother worked hard when he was young. Mina felt sympathetic and apologized for asking something personal. Deku reassured her that he was fine and that sharing had made him happy. Mina mentioned that she and the other girls had listened to the songs with Aizawa in his room. Deku grew nervous and made a joking comment about how perilous that might be. The class teased him playfully, and he asked for luck. Denki guessed that whatever happened, Deku would be fine within seconds. Later, Deku walked into Aizawa's office because he had been summoned. Aizawa and All Might greeted him warmly. All Might hugged him and explained that they appreciated the songs he had made for the class. They told Deku that they and Principal Nizu thought he might attract a lot of attention because of his kindness and talent. Deku admitted that the idea made him nervous, and All Might told him that a little nervousness was understandable. Aizawa remarked that Deku would be very fortunate, not only among his classmates and classmates' admirers but also among several professional heroes who had taken notice. Deku left the office feeling both astonished and a little overwhelmed. Lady, Bubble Girl, and Uwabami were among 9 pro heroes and 7 heroes in training 16 girls who were known to be interested in dating him. Them looked down and wondered how his mother would take this. Aizawa looked at him and said that they would not tell her until the time was right. Deku returned to the dorms and found everyone confused. Deacon asked how he had not died. Deku told Deacon that he had no idea. Nobody had even yelled at him, and he thought he needed a nap to sort out what had happened. Deku went up to his room, changed into something comfortable, and lay on his bed to rest while wondering what had happened. Nana opened another soda and suggested that he might have been given the green light to start pursuing relationships. Deku thought about how awkward he was around girls, especially Lona, and felt uncertain. Nana smiled and hoped things would not escalate further. Deku blushed and reflected on how he tended to get flustered around girls and apologized excessively. Nana smiled again and noted that the kid was in a complicated place in life, asking whether he was going to take a step forward. A short pause followed as everyone considered the implications and prepared for what came next. Nana observed that Deku was at a strange point in his life and asked if he was going to take a step forward. Deku admitted that he had no confidence, that he was scared, and that he struggled to talk to girls and feared what the other boys might think. Nana laughed softly and pointed out that he was already talking to a woman. Deku, embarrassed and unsure, explained that he was not used to girls. Nana, concerned, asked what had happened when he was younger. Deku confessed that he had been bullied his whole life, that girls had avoided or made fun of him when they did speak to him, and that the boys had beaten him up and told him to harm himself from a young age. Nana felt sad and angry on his behalf and asked what the teachers had done. Deku said the teachers had done nothing and had told everyone to avoid him. Nana's anger flared briefly, but Deku calmed her and reminded her it was something from the past. Nana told him to relax and instructed him to close his eyes. Deku followed her guidance and described entering his own mind. Nana surprised him with a playful boo, and Deku turned, blushing at the unexpected moment. Nana teased him lightly and then offered a warm, comforting hug that helped him feel less alone. A private moment followed that the narrative does not describe. Afterward, Nana expressed a desire to be part of his circle of close friends. Afterwards, Deku got up, took a shower, and dressed in a suit. He walked down to the common room where Momo complimented his fresh look and asked where he was going. Deku, a little embarrassed, said he was only going out to dinner with his mother. Mina and Toru reacted with affectionate encouragement, and Deku laughed nervously before saying he would be back the next afternoon. Denki then told Deku that he, Kiri, Mina, and Shiro wanted to talk with him before he left. Deku agreed and suggested meeting in the lobby. They all agreed and they walked downstairs together. Kiri began to start a conversation about their plans for Monday. Mina continued, saying that when he finally snapped and told everyone what had been happening, she had been right. He treated them badly, yelled all the time, and called them names. Mina listed examples of the names that hurt them and said they made people feel awful. Shiro added that what Deku had done on Monday had shown the bully was not as invincible as they had thought, but Denki spoke in a worried tone that when Deku had told everyone the bully had told him to kill himself, they had felt terrible and had a few questions. Deku nodded and invited them to ask. Mina sighed and asked if he had ever tried to harm himself. Deku looked shocked and shook his head, saying he had never done that. He had been bullied at school, but he would never try to hurt himself. Kiri smiled and asked if he had ever snapped like that in middle school. Deku explained that he had not been able to fight back then because he had no quirk and had been what people called a late bloomer. Deku went on to say that was why he sometimes suffered injuries when he used his quirk. Shiro asked if he had ever cut his wrist. Deku thought back briefly and said no, he had never done that. Denki then asked whether teachers had helped him. Deku sighed and, after making them promise not to be angry, said the teachers had not helped. They had not cared, and their words had been meaningless unless they actually did something. Mina, annoyed, called that bad teaching. Deku replied that it was in the past and tried to move on. Kiri asked if he had any scars from middle school. Deku pulled up his shirt and revealed a long scar, telling them it was the worst and that he had kept walking until he reached home. Shiro asked angrily who had done it. Deku put his shirt down and said it was not important anymore. Mina insisted it had been the bully, and Deku confirmed that it had been and that he had been in the hospital for 2 weeks. Kiri slammed a fist against the wall in frustration and demanded to know why Deku had not told Uedeka rubbed back of his head and explained that he did not think anyone would believe a quirkless kid who claimed a top student had bullied him. Denki hugged him and apologized, and Deku patted him on the back, telling them not to act differently toward the bully because he would probably just yell at them if they confronted him. Mina giggled and thanked him for the honesty. Kiri, Denki, and Shiro walked up the stairs while Mina lingered. Mina smiled and complimented how good Deku looked in his suit. Deku blushed and thanked her. Inside, Deku could hear Nana laughing in his head, and All Might, looking slightly exasperated, told Nana to ease up and leave the kid alone. Deku knocked at the agency office door and asked if All Might was ready to go. All Might rose and told him they should go get his mother. At the Deku household, Inko stepped out, telling them both they were late. Deku apologized and explained there had been a lot going on. Inko mentioned the news story that had said her son had stopped a bomb from going off in the mall. Deku, a little embarrassed, described the situation as a matter of life and death. Inko teased that there had been no one in the building, and All Might tried to protest, but Inko playfully pulled All Might's ear and told him not to make things worse. Deku hugged his mother and told her he loved her. Inko hugged him back, scolding him gently and saying he was still in trouble for being late. At dinner, Inko asked how his training was going, and Deku said it was going well. Inside his head, his mental voice tried not to laugh at the awkward family moment. All Might praised Deku, saying he was a very good and heroic kid, and Inko joked that UA was a very different kind of school where the faculty were unusual compared to other teachers. Everyone laughed at the description. Inko thanked All Might for taking them out to dinner, and All Might waved it off, saying it was nothing. Then Inko asked Deku whether he liked anyone at the moment. Deku choked on his food and insisted he did not. All Might observed that she had seen him with the girls more often lately, and Deku, now worried, explained that it was because All Might and Aizawa had been putting him into group work and sparring with the girls. All Might smiled and said there was more to tell. Since they were finished with dinner, he decided to say it then. All Might revealed that he was Deku's father. Inko confirmed it. Deku looked down in surprise and then admitted that he was over the moon about the news, but he had once made a bet with Todoroki that All Might was not his father. All Might asked what the bet had been, and Deku looked up and trailed off with a small embarrassed laugh, calling it a silly bet. AM said that they would find out tomorrow. AM explained that they were telling Deku now because he had already suspected something and, since Nana was in his head, she would have told him eventually. Inko asked happily what this was about and whether their son really had Nana in his head. AM told her not now. Inko urged him to hurry, and Deku asked how the two of them had met. Inko responded that she had once been a hero but had become P-Arginanti with Deku and raised him. Deku, confused, asked why she had never told him. Inko smiled and said he already knew why, and mentioned she was thinking about returning to hero work. AM sighed. Deku protested that it could not happen because it was too dangerous, saying he loved her too much to let her go back out there. AM thanked him, and Deku added that the same applied to AM himself. Inko promised she would be careful. Deku teased that it was like promising not to break his bones. Inko and AM pleaded with him to stop being reckless, and Deku joked he would stop only when he died. They all laughed. After AM learned what had happened to Deku during the drive and after dropping Inko off, AM asked quietly if Deku was sure it was okay for him to be called his dad. Deku smiled and assured him that of course he was his dad. AM, with tears in his eyes, admitted he had not been there to help Deku when he had been bullied, and Inko felt guilty though she should not. Deku sighed and told them to let go of the guilt. He had gotten through it day by day. He acknowledged being hurt and threatened in the past, but he had managed, and he did not want them to blame themselves. AM thanked him deeply. Deku laughed and accepted being called dad, noting he needed to get used to it since no one had ever called AM that before. They decided to inform the school staff. AM and Deku went to Nizu's office. AM announced their arrival and introduced Deku as his son. The teachers reacted with surprise. Mike and several others were stunned. Aizawa nodded. Midnight made a flirty remark that the students found awkward, and AM asked her to stop making advances toward a student. Deku blushed slightly and tried to downplay the moment. Aizawa added one practical matter. Deku would be placed on the girls' flight to Australia because the boys' flight was too full. Deku, surprised, asked why he was chosen. Aizawa placed a hand on Deku's shoulder and said simply that he was the one he trusted. Deku accepted the arrangement. Later, when Deku walked into the common area, he asked for everyone's attention and suggested that all students move away from the table except Todoroki. He announced in a quiet but steady voice that he had learned the night before that his father was him. Todoroki reacted dramatically and overturned a small table in celebration of having won a private bet. Deku and Todoroki exchanged a brief, amused moment. Some of the students were stunned by Deku's shy appearance, noting that he seemed more mature and reserved than usual. The female students teased and fussed over him in a teasing, dramatic way, which made Deku flush with embarrassment. Aizawa, trying to regain control, sighed and moved things along. Several teachers were surprised and amused, and Aizawa took a photo to share with the other faculty. The female teachers' group chat responded with messages of surprise and disbelief. Sam noticed that Deku had many scars and commented on them. Deku looked down and said that he had a lot of them and had learned to live with them. Aizawa expressed concern that so many injuries were not normal for someone his age. Todoroki sent a teasing message to his sister about the surprise of finding out Deku's family connection. Fuyumi responded with flustered banter. After the meeting, some of the teachers decided to get a drink, and several of the male faculty offered to accompany Aizawa. The students asked to come along, but Aizawa firmly refused. Several of the boys chose to head back to their rooms. Later, Nana teased Deku in a way that made him uncomfortable, but the scene is omitted. He returned to his room, closed and locked the door, drew the blinds, and prepared to deal with things privately. Nana's presence in his thoughts remained a complicated part of Deku's life, but he resolved to focus on school, his friends, and the new arrangements that lay ahead. Deku lay down and tried to enter his mind. He found a private memory and chose not to dwell on it. He left it alone and fell asleep. Later, Denki yelled through Deku's door to see if he was awake. Deku answered that he was. Denki apologized and said they had some questions. Deku opened the door and invited Denki and Kree inside. Kree asked how Deku had put up with him for so long. Deku explained that he had tried not to let the other person get to him, and that after being hit with explosive attacks over and over he had gradually learned to cope. Denki told Deku that he had come so far. Deku laughed and agreed that it was strange to look back. Kree reminded him that on the first day he had almost been kicked out by Y. Denki added that if Deku took the exam again now he would rank near the top. Kree noted how Deku used to get injured constantly when he first started, but now he was rarely hurt and had single-handedly saved classmates, teachers, and 2 children. Denki echoed the sentiment that Deku had improved a great deal. Deku blushed and tried to deflect the praise, saying his friends had done well too. Kree, confident, insisted that Deku's selfless nature was what made people admire him. Denki agreed that the class was glad to have him. Denki informed Deku that everyone was downstairs waiting to start dinner. Deku hesitated, saying he did not think he could go downstairs. Kree reassured him that it was okay, that the girls were talking now and the other boys were no longer shocked. Deku asked if they were sure, and Kree and Denki stood and said he should be fine. After dinner, Mina asked if Deku was packed. Deku sighed and said he would do it tomorrow. Aizawa walked in and announced that they were leaving the next day to go to a hotel. The whole class rushed to their rooms. Miss Joke asked if that was to get everyone packed. Aizawa clarified that they were actually leaving on Monday and that he had intended to get everyone packed and ready. The class sighed in response. Aizawa wished the students good night. Everyone in Class 1A replied and Deku approached Aizawa to whisper a simple request that he take care of her. Aizawa shook his head and declined. He then left with Miss Joke. Deku told everyone he needed to sleep, and the class said good night. The next day passed without incident. Izuku Midoriya woke to the sound of Aizawa telling everyone to get ready. He sat up, considered what to wear, and settled on something simple. When he walked out, the class saw several pro-heroes and other guests already gathered: the Wild Pussycats, Midnight, the Big Three, Eri, Koda, and Mei. Aizawa told the class that all the boys would take one bus except Midoriya, who would go with the girls. Midoriya muttered that after the plane and the bus, he was not surprised to be placed on the same vehicle as the girls. Aizawa gave a small, almost amused response. Shoto Todoroki explained that his sister would be joining the trip as well. They packed and boarded the buses. On the girls' bus, Midoriya sat between Tsuyu and Uraraka and tried to keep his attention on anything but the others. Midnight noticed he looked flushed and asked if he was all right. Midoriya said he was fine but admitted to being a little worried about the League of Villains. Midnight reassured him that they had been quiet lately. Momo reminded him that they had not acted since the incident with Overhaul, and the others echoed their concern. Tsuyu checked if he was okay and he said he was just tired. Several of the pro-heroines offered supportive comments and asked if he would be all right. Midoriya said he would be fine. Mina chatted about being excited to go to the beach in a new swimsuit. The girls teased one another lightheartedly about summer plans and swimwear, and the conversation kept Midoriya distracted for a while. On the boys' bus, Aizawa scolded Denki about bringing a frozen bottle and the distraction it caused. The bus was noisy and lively. Back on the girls' bus, Jiro had her headphones on and Momo read a book while others talked quietly. Eri dozed against Nijire. The mood was mostly cheerful with small moments of concern for Midoriya's worries. When they reached the airport, Aizawa announced that Australia was a 7.57-hour flight away and explained the seating arrangements. There were 2 planes large enough for the boys, but only one had extra space for the girls, so Midoriya would have to fly with them. Mirko and other heroes nearby made teasing comments about Midoriya's situation, and Ryukyu laughed and told the others to leave him alone. Iwabumi added a playful remark about how odd the whole setup was. Fuyumi Todoroki approached Shoto and asked if he had remembered to pack carefully this time. Shoto remembered the last trip and the family argument that followed. In a flashback, Fuyumi had berated him about not packing underwear for a 4-week vacation. Shoto had protested, and siblings had argued with a mix of frustration and emotion. The memory left Shoto grateful that their current travel felt less chaotic than that past moment. Aizawa, looking annoyed, reminded the students to stay calm and announced that they were at the airport and should hurry to check in. After clearing security, Aizawa complained about Denki's ice bottle once more. Denki defended himself, and Aizawa was ready to yell until Midoriya stepped between them and suggested they get breakfast instead. Aizawa calmed down, handed out a credit card for purchases, and told the students not to overspend. He then warned everyone to stay close and be back by 9, as the plane left at 10. They ate breakfast, keeping an eye on the clock. With 30 minutes to boarding, Mina approached Midoriya and asked what he was doing. Midoriya was surprised and explained that he had been trying to stay with the group, but Tenya Ida had intervened earlier and prevented him from joining Uraraka and the others in a different part of the terminal. Mina listened sympathetically and offered to keep him company until boarding. Mina asked for clarification about Lita's suggestion that she go with Deku while Lita stayed with him. Deku, confused, explained that it was fine since they were friends and Lita should stay with him. Mina rolled her eyes and then asked if he had eaten breakfast. Deku nodded that he had, and Mina said she had too before mentioning that she had questions. Mina asked if she looked good, prompted by the song Deku had made for her. Deku remembered and reassured her that she was beautiful and did not need people who did not appreciate her. Mina was shocked and asked if he really thought she was pretty. Deku affirmed that he did and added that whoever ended up with her should be happy. Mina hoped it would be him and smiled. Deku agreed. After they talked a bit longer, Aizawa walked up beside Mina and Deku and teased that he saw them like they were on a date. Mina blushed and Deku turned red, both denying it. Miss Joke stood behind Aizawa and told him not to bully the kids. Deku calmed down and then asked Aizawa about his date with Joke. Joke blushed and both of them denied anything romantic, insisting they would never date. Aizawa agreed and Deku responded with a teasing remark. Aizawa then told everyone to get ready because they were leaving soon. On the boys' plane, Denki asked why Deku was on the other plane. Aizawa explained that Deku was the only one who could handle being around the girls without causing trouble. Lita questioned why they had not simply split the groups more evenly, and Aizawa snapped at him to be quiet. Am urged everyone to calm down. On the girls' plane, Mina suggested playing Truth or Dare and the others agreed. Tsu pointed out that Deku was not playing with them. Pix Bob sat upright with a hoodie on, and the other girls quietly agreed that he looked cute while he appeared to sleep. Mina nodded and suggested they start a game of Truth or Dare. Pix Bob chose Dare. Mina smiled and dared her to do a silly, harmless challenge. Pix Bob sighed, snapped at Mina in annoyance, and then complied in a way that made everyone a little uncomfortable. Deku, who was not actually asleep, panicked inwardly and wondered what to do as the situation unfolded. Everyone else drifted away. Nana left while telling Deku that he was on his own, and the door slammed behind her. Deku muttered in his head in frustration. Pix Bob moved on to May and asked whether she wanted Truth or Dare. May chose Truth. Pix Bob asked an inappropriate question about private thoughts involving Deku, but May declined to share and instead offered a guarded, evasive answer. The others reacted with surprise and disapproval at the direction the conversation had taken, and the group quickly shifted topics. Eri, who was listening, asked an innocent, naive question about a word she did not understand. The older girls exchanged worried looks and told her that it was something she would learn about when she was older and that they would explain things at the right time. Eri accepted the reply happily and called Aizawa Grandpa in her own cheerful way, then called Deku Mr., and insisted he was like a father figure to her because he had helped save her. The others reacted with surprise and gentle amusement, and Mirko prodded Eri about who she imagined as a mother. Eri admitted she did not have one yet but hoped she would someday. Deku winced inwardly at the thought of being seen as a parental figure. Nijire noticed Eri looked tired and offered to take her to another room to sleep, telling Eri to call if anything happened. Eri nodded, and Nijire led her away to rest. A short neutral moment followed as the group settled back into the living area. Rag suggested that Pix Bob sit back down, and Pix Bob complied. May then turned to Midnight and asked her truth or dare. Midnight chose truth. May asked a forward question that Midnight declined to answer directly. She instead referenced a past embarrassment in a brief, non-explicit way and moved the conversation along. Joke excused herself to stay with Eri, offering to look after her, and left the room. Midnight then asked Momo whether she wanted truth or dare. Momo shyly chose truth. Midnight asked whether Momo paid attention to Deku in certain situations. Momo admitted quietly that she had noticed him during training and other non-NTMT moments and admired his dedication. Jiro teased her about it, and Momo blushed but downplayed it. Midnight laughed and noted that the girls were easily flustered by admiration for someone else. Sue took out her phone and showed a photo of Deku in a training setting. The group reacted with varying degrees of surprise and amusement while Deku silently cringed inside. Time passed on the long flight. After about a 19-hour trip, their plane landed at 7 in the morning. A tall boy standing nearby smiled and thought that the group had finally arrived. The newcomers looked around at how different the place felt, and someone greeted the group, mentioning Yue. Aizawa, watching the exchange, regarded the newcomers and asked who they were. Gil Conroy introduced himself with a smile and explained that he would be their guide for the month. Aizawa sighed in relief and told Gil it was good to see him. Gil returned the sentiment and added that it was nice to meet the students and teachers too. Aizawa remarked that Nizu had not told them everything about Gil, and Gil confirmed that he intended to explain more on the bus. Once on the bus, Deku raised a question about Gil's role. Gil laughed and said he was a hero in training, just like them. M asked why Gil was showing them around and pointed out that he looked a little young for the job. Gil promised to explain later and laid out a few basic rules. He said first names only, no one should go anywhere without informing others, and if he said not to go somewhere, they were not to go. Everyone nodded in agreement. Gil then said he would use nicknames to make things easier for him and listed the hero names he would use. Deku, M, Midnight, Pixie Bob, Mandalay, Tiger, Ragdoll, Mirko, Bubble Girl, Ryukyu, Miss Joke or simply Joke, and Uwabami. He followed with the students' real names for clarity: Jiro, Momo, Mina, Tsu, Mei, Denki, Kree, Toru, Shoto, Sato, Aji, Koda, Aoyama, Shoji, Siro, Fumikage, Nijire, Tamaki, Mirio, and the two most important, Eri and Kotal. Aizawa pointed out that Gil had not mentioned Aizawa's own name, and Gil replied with a grin before sharing a few playful nicknames he had made up for people he didn't want to call by their real names. Deku then asked about Gil's quirk. Gil explained that his ability was similar to Sir's quirk. When he touched someone, they could not use their quirk for a limited time, and the duration decreased the more quirks he suppressed at once. He added that his joints ached after using it for a while. Aizawa observed that Deku was becoming quiet again, and Gil laughed at the exchange. Nizu had booked a high-class hotel for everyone, Gil told them. The students were split between towers, one for girls and one for boys, with each gender having a floor and the penthouse occupying the top. The ground floors were for dining and the lobby. When they arrived at the hotel, Gil checked in on behalf of Yue and presented the reservation. The clerk handed over key cards for the boys, key cards for the girls, and the penthouse key. Gil distributed the girls' keys to Midnight and the boys' keys as appropriate, then explained that Deku had the penthouse. Deku looked confused and embarrassed. Aizawa explained that everyone thought Deku deserved the penthouse and that Nizu had booked it before they had a chance to ask. Deku protested that it was unnecessary, but Kree and Denki told him he had earned it and needed to relax. After a moment, Deku accepted the penthouse key, with the agreement that anyone could come in when they wanted. After everyone unpacked and returned to the lobby, Aizawa asked where dinner would be. Gil booked a table in the hotel for 35, explaining that he had already eaten and only needed arrangements for the rest. The clerk confirmed the reservation and Gil and Aizawa urged the students to hurry. Later, when they were settled, Gil slipped away to prepare. He left the room, changed into his hero gear, and checked his equipment. He fastened a distinctive scythe to his back, donned a black helmet, and secured 2 guns and holsters. He paused for a moment on the rooftop, looking out over the city and wondering when he would truly feel ready. An inner voice that Gil had come to call Satan told him that no one ever felt completely ready. Being a hero was a leap of faith. Gil drew a steadying breath, accepted that truth, and prepared to face whatever came next. Aizawa was checking on Gil to see if he was all right when he noticed someone climb to the roof. He followed and asked who the newcomer was. Gil explained that he could explain, then removed his hood and helmet and revealed himself. Aizawa recognized him and confirmed that he was a vigilante. Gil offered his hands as if to be cuffed, but Aizawa stopped him and said he would not turn him in. He only wanted to ask questions. Gil agreed and was escorted to Aizawa's room while Aizawa summoned the other teachers. Aizawa asked how Gil had started his vigilante activities. Gil sighed and explained that he was the fifth in a line descended from an old leader of a vigilante group. He told them a family legend. A distant ancestor had made a dark pact long ago to survive, and the terms of that pact involved a cycle tied to the hero unit. If the person chosen by that bloodline failed, the debt continued across generations. Aizawa and the others reacted with concern. One of the teachers pointed out that, if the pact were true, all the leaders of the hero unit should already be gone. Gil answered that the heroes were still alive, but they wanted him dead so he could not keep the cycle continuing. When Aizawa asked whether the class was in danger, Gil assured him that the students were currently safe. The hero unit had not acted in a long time, he said, but he had been searching for their base without success. At that moment Deku entered the room. Everyone looked at him. Gil asked how long Deku had been there, and Deku apologized, saying he had not meant to interrupt something important. Gil waved it off and told Aizawa that they would visit his school the next day. Aizawa nodded. On the roof, Gil and Deku talked privately. Gil said he wanted to talk about One for All. Deku admitted he did not know what that was. Gil said he would speak with All Might about it later. He asked Deku a blunt question about whether he would fight, and Deku replied that he would fight if someone was evil. Satisfied, Gil told Deku to tell his father that he already knew certain things, then stepped backward and jumped off the roof. Deku ran to the edge and saw Gil land on another rooftop. He thought Gil was impressive. Nana commented that Gil was skilled. Deku went to tell All Might that Gil knew about One for All and All for One. All Might, still weakened, coughed and asked how Deku had learned. Deku said he hadn't told Gil anything and suspected Gil had figured it out on his own. When All Might asked whether Gil wanted to know more, Deku said Gil seemed uninterested in learning further. All Might decided he would inform Principal Nizu and thanked Deku. Deku prepared to leave, but All Might told him he could stay if he wished. Meanwhile, Gil landed on a rooftop and thought about tracking down the leader he sought. He ran past an old warehouse and slipped inside. It was quiet. He called out to see if anyone was there. A gunshot sounded and 7 figures dropped down into the space. The person in the middle taunted Gil about wasting time hunting when they could have led him straight to their target. One of the others bragged about past killings, trying to intimidate him. Gil responded that he would stop them tonight. The encounter became a fast, kinetic battle. Gil moved with quick, precise strikes, disabling 2 of the attackers almost immediately. The remaining 5 tried to press the attack. 1 opened fire while others lunged. Gil dodged the barrage and used agile maneuvers to disarm and incapacitate opponents without leaving lasting gore. A muscular combatant charged but was swiftly neutralized by a well-timed counter. The leader, angered, signaled retreat as a small explosive went off elsewhere in the warehouse. The attackers scattered. Gil dashed to the rooftops and caught his breath, counting down the remaining threats. He told himself there were 4 more to go. Back at the school, All Might said he would speak with Nizu soon. The teachers and students watched from inside as smoke and fire rose in the distance. Everyone ducked instinctively when a loud bang sounded. Aizawa checked on the children. Eri and Koda ran to Deku for reassurance. Deku comforted them, patting the back of their heads and telling them they would be all right. Mirko offered to go help with rescue efforts alongside the pros, but Aizawa insisted they let the local teams handle it for now. They turned on the television. The reporter announced that an explosion had occurred at an abandoned building. Investigators suspected a bomb, but thankfully no one had been hurt. The group sighed in relief. Aizawa noted that they had had enough excitement for one day. Later, Eri asked Mirio if she could stay with Deku that night, and Koda asked Mandalay the same. Mirio and Mandalay said yes if Deku agreed. Both children ran to Deku to ask directly, and Deku smiled and agreed that they could stay with him that night. The two children hugged him and thanked Mr. Deku. Meanwhile, Gil went into another room to tend to his wounds. He searched for a first aid kit, found one, and decided it would do. He took out bandages, wrapped his injuries carefully, and lay down on the floor, telling himself to be careful because he was still hurt. Satan expressed surprise at the calmness of the moment, and Gil felt a flash of anger but kept his composure. A knock sounded at the door and Gil stood up. Aizawa approached and asked if Gil had returned. Gil remained silent. Aizawa said he knew Gil was in there and then opened the door. Gil thought this was bad and quickly put on a pair of shorts. Aizawa then asked whether Gil had anything to do with that incident. Gil muttered a curse under his breath. He smiled and greeted Aizawa. Aizawa sighed and told him to lie down. Gil insisted he was fine. Aizawa pushed Gil onto the floor and said he was bleeding and needed help. Gil sighed and agreed only because he had no choice. Aizawa sat beside him and asked about getting rid of quirks. Gil laughed and explained that a gun was not a quirk. Aizawa pressed and asked if there had been a bomb as well. Gil admitted he had not known about a bomb. Aizawa said he needed help. Gil asked why. Aizawa explained he had to remove some bullets. Gil told him to get Momo and Mei. Aizawa then requested Kree, Deku, and Tiger to hold Gil down. Gil said he did not care. Kree happened to be in the hallway. Aizawa called him over and told him to fetch Joke, Momo, and Mei. Kree nodded and ran to find them. Aizawa phoned Deku and demanded he come to Gil's room immediately. Tiger arrived in the hallway and hurried in, asking what had happened. Only Deku, Midnight, and Aizawa knew about Gil's work as a vigilante. Gil said he would explain everything later. Kree opened the door and called for Joke, Mei, and Momo. The three arrived quickly, confused. Momo rushed forward, worried. Mei took stock of the situation. Deku checked on Gil. Aizawa assigned roles. Momo would do first aid, Mei would help extract the bullets, Joke would try to make Gil laugh to ease the tension, Kree and Tiger would hold his arms, and Deku would secure his legs. Momo began basic first aid while Aizawa warned that the next part would hurt. Gil gave a short, evasive reply instead of answering the question. Mei worked to remove the bullets while Gil laughed nervously and protested. She did her best despite the odd circumstances. When all the bullets were removed, Aizawa wrapped Gil with dressings and told him to avoid getting shot again. Joke asked why Gil had been shot. After Gil explained what had happened, Aizawa noted that Gil had stopped 6 people in the course of his operations. Gil lowered his gaze and said he had done it to prevent the cycle of harm from continuing. Aizawa listened and set a boundary. Lethal force was only acceptable if someone was actively trying to hurt others. Gil replied that he rarely resorted to killing, and when he did, he had a reason. Momo recognized that Gil was acting as a vigilante and asked what it was like. Gil said it felt similar to being a hero, but people saw it as wrong. Mei admitted she had feared he was dead. Gil smiled and reassured everyone that he was not dying yet, and reminded them all to get some sleep. Aizawa agreed and told everyone to return to their rooms, noting that Deku's younger charges should not be left worrying. Deku said he had already put them to bed. Aizawa asked them not to tell anyone else and to say he needed to ask some questions if asked. They all nodded and left, leaving only Aizawa and Gil behind. Aizawa told the rest that they could go. He lingered because he wanted to make sure Gil was really okay. Gil smiled and told him to go. The next morning, Aizawa called for everyone to board the bus. Once aboard, Gil announced that they were going to his school that day to show the others around. Mina asked if they would need to do any work. Gil smiled and said no, they would just visit other classes and watch training and fights. The group cheered, and Gil laughed, asking them to calm down. AM commented that he had been meaning to see how the UA sister campus was doing. When they arrived, 2 teachers met them. Gil acknowledged them politely. One teacher, Sir Devi, spoke to Gil with a clipped tone and warned him not to roll his eyes at him again. Gil rolled his eyes despite the warning and the teacher steered him toward the classroom. As they entered, someone in the class made a rude comment about Gil and the class laughed. Sir Dav stepped forward and reminded everyone to use proper forms of address. He then announced that Gil's role as their guide would be replaced. Aizawa, surprised, asked why. Sir Dav explained that Gil was under arrest and that they had originally allowed him a month to show UA around, but he had proven too dangerous to remain free. The news spread through the room. Aizawa stared, asking who would be replacing Gil, and another voice greeted him as the scene ended. The exchange program demonstration ended with a tense greeting. The students from Japan, along with Gil, looked toward the newcomers and shouted for Mineta to step forward. Sir Dav explained that they had decided their top student should be the one to face Gil. Aizawa asked if Gil's file had been read. Gil answered that it had, and that if he were allowed to take the match he would finish things with UA first. Aizawa reacted with anger at Gil's attitude and reminded him of his past dangerous conduct and inappropriate behavior toward students, which had nearly put others in harm's way. Mineta protested that he was not as bad as everyone said. Izuku Midoriya reacted with visible irritation and began to prepare himself, but Gil placed a hand on him and insisted on handling the situation himself, saying he would deal with Deku afterwards. Aizawa accused Gil of endangering students and attempting to cause serious harm, and then he ordered Gil not to use his quirk, guns, or scythe during the bout. Sir Dav voiced his readiness to have his own instructors and students intervene if necessary. Gil shrugged off the restriction and said he would fight anyway. Aizawa called Nizu and set up the terms on the control system while informing the rest of the faculty. Nizu, consulted over the phone, allowed the match to proceed without holding Gil back. With the decision made, Aizawa leaned into the microphone and instructed Gil to go all out. Sir Dav objected, but Gil dismissed his concerns and accepted the challenge, preferring Aizawa's judgment. At the combat area, Mineta tried a ranged attack, but Gil evaded it smoothly. Aizawa taunted that this was not impressive, and Gil smiled before launching a fast, athletic assault. He kept his distance at times and used precise strikes to subdue challengers. Sir Dav called for his class and teachers to join the fray, but Gil negotiated that if they did so, he would be allowed to use his quirk and weapons. After a brief, heated discussion, Aizawa authorized Gil to regain his gear. Deku dashed to where Gil had left his scythe and firearms and grabbed them, hoping they would help. He ran back and tossed them to Gil while Gil kept 25 opponents at bay. Gil reassembled his weapons and announced that the real part of the match was beginning. Observers from both schools watched closely. All Might and Midnight acknowledged Gil's skill, while Nizu commented that, in his view, Gil had earned the status of being treated like a UA first-class student. Pixie Bob asked whether they should assist, but Nizu wanted to see how Gil handled the weapons before intervening. Gil engaged in a swift, choreographed display of combat. He combined kickboxing-like movements for hand-to-hand exchanges and used his scythe to control space against charges. He moved with agility, dodging and deflecting thrown objects and shots in a way that read like a practiced, stylized battle. After a short time, many of the attackers were forced to their feet in retreat. Deku supplied additional ammunition, tossing magazines toward Gil. Gil accepted them, secured them to his gear, and readied his firearms. Aizawa authorized non-lethal fire against the area. Gil fired at the weapons and support of the attackers, aiming to neutralize their capacity to continue without inflicting graphic harm. The opponents staggered and fell back, non-graphically incapacitated. Once the immediate threat was contained, Aizawa declared the exercise over and acknowledged Gil's effective performance. Mineta, frustrated and angry, produced a small firearm and fired a shot that grazed Gil's shoulder. Gil disarmed Mineta with a precise move and made a sharp remark about basic weapon handling. Aizawa called for medical staff to attend to Mineta. Gil then told Deku that he could take the restrained opponent. Aizawa moved the class back together and Mina asked whether Gil would be returning with them to Japan. Aizawa admitted uncertainty and said Nizu would likely want to question him further. Deku, still tense from the confrontation, walked over to where Mineta had been and powered himself up to near his practiced limit. At that moment, uniformed officers arrived and took Mineta into custody. Two individuals whom Gil recognized moved in with the officers. Gil instructed everyone to evacuate immediately and told Deku to go without him. Aizawa demanded to know who the newcomers were. Gil told him to clear the area and warned that the newcomers were not there for a simple arrest. The lead operative stated that Gil's fate was not their concern, but that they needed to neutralize him. One of the operatives positioned himself on the roof as a long-range shooter while another revealed an array of blades, preparing to engage up close. Gil braced himself, assessing the two attackers and preparing for a new, more dangerous confrontation. As the faculty and students withdrew per Gil's orders, the situation intensified. The sniper settled into position, and the sword-wielding assailant moved to engage. Gil checked his weapons and steeled himself for the next phase of the fight. A tense pause followed as both sides prepared to make their first moves. The scene opened on a chaotic shootout. A masked sniper fired and taunted Gil, accusing him of being the one who had shot him. The sniper moved erratically, firing wild shots that missed, and Gil drew a second pistol to stop him. The sniper managed to strike Gil in the side, and Gil staggered, but he steadied himself and returned fire, neutralizing the sniper in a burst of precise shots. The action felt like something from an intense anime battle rather than a gruesome scene. Aizawa rushed in and asked if Gil was all right. Gil replied that the sniper had hit his side. Deku arrived immediately, holding Gil and asking for the nurse. The other students followed behind without the younger children. The nurse arrived and reported that Gil was in bad shape and needed to go to the hospital right away. Gil insisted that he was fine and asked for the same treatment they had given him before. The nurse reminded everyone that the other wounded needed care too. Gil insisted again that he only needed his side wrapped up. Aizawa sighed and urged Gil to go, promising he would be fine, and Gil agreed only if Aizawa came with him. Aizawa nodded and told everyone to get back to the hotel. They would be there later. The nurse assured them Gil would likely be out by the afternoon. Back at the hotel, the classmates gathered in the common room. Mina commented that it had been a lot to take in. All Might observed that they still did not know what would happen to Gil once he was better. Deku punched a wall in frustration and thought aloud that he wished they had been there. Midnight told him to calm down, reminding him that Gil hadn't wanted them to be hurt and that it had been his fight. Deku excused himself for a walk. All Might noted quietly that Nightai's death had affected Deku deeply. Lita admitted she had never seen Deku like this before. Mirko guessed that Deku must have read reports on the case and been shaken by them. All Might connected the timing. The day Gil had faced Overhaul was the same day Night-Eye had died, and he suspected Deku felt he might have been able to prevent it. Mirio agreed and asked whether anyone had talked to Deku about it. The class shook their heads. Momo offered to check on Deku, but All Might insisted that he would since he was Deku's mentor. Momo nodded. All Might went to Deku's room and asked if he was all right. Deku stood in the doorway and admitted he didn't really know. All Might invited him to talk, and they sat down together. Deku confessed that he was terrified of losing anyone else but also felt the impossible weight of not being able to save everyone. All Might reminded him gently that all Deku could do was his best, and that being the best for himself was part of being a true hero. Deku worried that if he did nothing, it would be worse for Gil. All Might hugged him and said that Gil would not want Deku to be consumed by guilt or risk himself unnecessarily. Gil would want them to stay safe and finish the mission. Deku demurred at the idea of bringing in Inko, then smiled weakly and refused. All Might laughed quietly and said he felt the same. Deku still wanted to take a walk to clear his head. All Might suggested Momo go with him since she looked worried, but Deku told her not to worry and to tell the others he was fine. He stepped outside for fresh air. As he walked, someone called out to him in jest, and he saw Aizawa and Gil approaching. Gil assured Deku that he was fine and that he had been through worse. Deku accepted that and told him not to worry. Gil asked if Deku wanted to know anything about the situation. When Deku asked how many enemies were still at large, Gil admitted he thought the number had increased. What they believed were 2 were now 3, and that realization made Deku furious with the possibility. Gil said it was a possibility and that the facts pointed that way, but he needed to get back out into the field to help. Deku calmed down and suggested they tell the others, but Gil said he shouldn't have told Deku in the first place. He planned to inform only the teachers and the professionals so the students could relax. Deku patted him on the shoulder and told him nobody blamed him. Gil smiled and asked if they should head back, and Deku agreed. When they returned to the hotel and reunited everyone in the same room, Aizawa prompted Gil to say what he needed to say. Gil announced that they were going out to dinner at a nice 5-star place and that they should wear something appropriate. Deku reminded everyone that they were supposed to bring suits. The boys from Class 1A and the male pros confirmed they had been told to bring suits. Aizawa pointed out they were meant to bring clothes in general, and Joke rolled his eyes at Aizawa's bluntness. Gil explained that he had assumed people might not bring suits, so he had arranged to have some ready, and he told Aizawa they would go shopping the next day. Aizawa agreed, then asked Gil to tell them everything he had told him earlier. Gil hesitated, gathered himself, and prepared to share the full details. Aizawa sighed, annoyed that someone thought he had forgotten. He told Gil that he had not forgotten and instructed Gil to tell everyone. After explaining everything and getting dressed, Aizawa asked whether Gil really believed someone would do that. Gil sighed and said the alternative was that they would hand him over to a Nomu, though he did not think the man was powerful enough for that. Gil trailed off, unwilling to speculate further. Aizawa hurried toward Gil, urgency written on his face. Aizawa asked what was wrong. Gil explained that they were going to dinner now. Aizawa asked if everyone was ready. Everyone boarded the bus, and Gil confirmed that everyone had arrived. Gil told them that he would be at another table handling some things and that Aizawa had his contact information to text when they were ready to leave. Aizawa asked, confused, why Gil was leaving. Gil shrugged it off and told them to have a good night without him. Deku checked that Gil was sure and asked if anyone would go with him. Kirishima nodded and offered that they could go along if Gil wanted company. Aizawa, annoyed, told the students to leave him alone and not to question what Gil was doing. They were here to take a break. Gil agreed and reminded them that this trip was meant to be a restful break, so they should relax. Aizawa conceded and asked what they would do the next day. Gil sighed and said they would go to the mall and that he would show them around the area. The students cheered while the pro teachers smiled. Aizawa asked whether there would be groups. Gil confirmed there would be groups and added that, if they were lucky, they might make it to the beach. People cheered again. Aizawa complimented Gil on the effort he had put into planning. Gil admitted he was doing his best for the kids and for the older members who needed time to relax. At dinner, Gil moved to a booth and Aizawa began organizing the seating. Aizawa decided the girls would sit at one table and the boys at another. Present Mike tried to argue that the kids should be allowed to be kids, but Aizawa gave him a deadpan look and warned that if he let them out of his sight for even a second, something reckless would happen. Present Mike protested that they were not that bad. Deku and Mina chimed in with teasing remarks about the students' tendencies to do wild things. Momo noted that the group was an energetic one. Present Mike insisted he had only been trying to help. Denki joked about things inevitably going wrong. Aizawa sighed and muttered that his nerves about the class seemed to be useless. Midnight asked what he meant. Aizawa explained that he had a kind of sixth sense about something chaotic about to happen with Class 1. Denki grinned and blamed Aizawa for catching him whenever he tried something silly. Present Mike conceded that Aizawa was right about the students. Aizawa gave up trying to keep everything tidy and asked if they could eat. At the girls' table, they all sat and ordered food and drinks. Midnight teased about whether anyone had a crush, and the girls blushed. Present Mike ribbed Midnight, and Midnight flushed and told Present Mike to stop. Present Mike admitted that he did not mind the teasing. The pro heroes nearby laughed, and Mina excitedly tried to propose a plan. Present Mike and Mina argued good-naturedly over who had the better idea. Midnight teased Present Mike about his age, and Present Mike looked embarrassed. Momo commented that Aizawa had a tsundere demeanor that could be endearing. Jiro shot back in annoyance, and Momo playfully scolded her language. The conversation turned to teasing about body image in a rowdy, teasing way among the students. Eri, who had been listening, innocently asked what a particular word meant. The adults reacted with surprise and quickly explained that it was a word children did not need to know yet, telling her to ask when she was older. Eri then mentioned that she had said the word to Koda earlier, and the adults exchanged worried looks. Present Mike told Eri it was fine but asked her to go play with Koda, and Eri ran off. Everyone hoped that the conversation would not spread further. Midnight admitted feeling a little guilty, and E-Lady teased that it was definitely Midnight's fault. They all guessed that Deku would be the first to find out about the situation, and Mina confirmed she felt the same. At the boys' table, the conversation was rowdy and playful. All Might asked who they liked these days. Deku observed that Koda seemed to have taken an interest in Eri. Koda denied it immediately. Aizawa dismissed the claim as nonsense. The adults exchanged a few awkward, exaggerated warnings about responsibility and boundaries, then quickly moved on. A brief, awkward adult conversation followed about appropriate behavior and maintaining proper boundaries with younger children. The mood lightened and the boys returned to joking and teasing each other. After dinner, Aizawa texted Gil to say they were leaving. Gil replied that he would see them later. Gil looked up from his phone and asked whether they really wanted to be vigilantes like him while he was away. One of the men in the meeting said they wanted to be the next Black Hoods. Gil nodded and warned them that they would need their own weapons and that certain types of equipment were not to be copied. Changing colors or copying designs would not be acceptable. He emphasized the importance of training and personal responsibility. The right-side man acknowledged the instruction. A neutral bridge followed as the group prepared to leave the restaurant and move on to the next part of their plans. Gil set simple rules for the new group: only confront villains, protect civilians, and avoid acting until the end of the month. He reminded them to be careful with the vigilante work. The recruits nodded, and one of the girls thanked him. Gil added that anyone else who wanted to join should have their records and fighting ability checked first. The middle recruit promised they would spread the word and reassured Gil they could be found if needed. Gil accepted the offer to eat together and welcomed them as comrades. After the meal, the three recruits slipped down an alley, changed into their hero outfits, and headed out on patrol. Gil went for a run across the city and drifted toward an industrial block, where he found a laboratory. Inside, he saw 10 large artificial beings similar to those seen at USJ and one smaller specimen contained in a large tube. Alarm tightened Gil's chest. The machines were dangerous, and the situation looked precarious. Voices carried from deeper in the lab. One man urged that whatever they were planning had better work because he did not want to work with the others any longer than necessary. The scientist answered that he was 99% sure the plan would succeed. Threats were exchanged, and Gil felt the need to act, but the risk of disturbing the containment was high. He decided to withdraw for the moment. Back at the hotel, Gil struck a wall in frustration. He worried about what to do next and how to keep the discovery from UA and the police while he figured out a plan. The next morning, Aizawa noted that Gil was up and ready to go. They packed for the beach along with the rest of the students. Gil, impatient, let everyone choose their own groups. On the bus, he sternly reminded the students that if any trouble arose, they should find him or report to a teacher or pro-hero. He emphasized that they were not to engage villains themselves. Aizawa asked about the pros' role, and Gil clarified that while the pros would act if needed, the students were to avoid fighting. When a classmate pointed out that Gil seemed unarmed, Gil produced a scythe and a pair of guns to reassure them. Everyone accepted the explanation, and Gil said they would meet at the food court at 1 and then head to the beach. Deku wandered through the shops alone while Uraraka and the other girls stayed together, and Ida tried to keep everyone organized. All Might caught up with Deku and insisted on looking around together like a father and son. Deku, unexpectedly emotional, agreed and they walked toward the food court. At the food court, Gil kept a watchful eye and told the students to get something to eat or go without until dinner, calling out one particularly indecisive student by name. Aizawa muttered about odd dynamics and then dismissed the thought. All Might and Deku arrived together, and the group bantered about food choices. Deku gently guided the younger children toward another table, and a classmate captured the sweet moment on video, later promising to share it with everyone. After lunch, they reached the beach. Deku stepped out in a snug swimsuit that All Might had picked for him, drawing surprised and exaggerated reactions from some classmates. All Might beamed with pride at how it suited him. Classmates teased one another good-naturedly, and Aizawa photographed the scene to show Principal Nizu, who replied that he would need to discuss it later. They spent a pleasant afternoon by the sea, enjoying the sun and games. Later, the group boarded the bus to return, the day winding down with the usual mix of tired laughter and quiet conversation. Aizawa announced that they were going to a pizza place that night and told everyone to wear whatever and have a good time. Gil smiled and asked where Aizawa would be, and Aizawa replied that he would be with them all. Gil laughed and made a teasing remark that earned him an eye roll from Aizawa. Deku corrected the pronunciation and Gil apologized playfully, redirecting his teasing toward Miss Joke. Joke and Aizawa both flushed with embarrassment while the others shouted encouragement. Aizawa sighed and gave in to the teasing. The group cheered, and Deku muttered nervously that someone might not be alone after all. Joke bit her lip and said that he would not be alone. Midnight groaned and asked everyone to quiet down, and Momo offered to help lighten the mood, which the other girls admitted was their plan as well. Deku blinked and apologized, overwhelmed by the attention. Tsu pressed Deku about who he liked the most, and the girls egged him on. Deku called for help, feeling cornered, and AM said she would offer support without crossing anyone's boundaries. Aizawa looked distracted and said he was a bit busy. Deku admitted that he found all the girls kind and could not choose just one, and he asked them to understand. Momo asked if anyone objected to sharing him. No one spoke in protest. Jiro noted that he had just watched Deku start what could be called a harem. Deku sighed and admitted that he half expected he would have to accept that arrangement because of Nizu. Midnight asked how they intended to share him. Deku explained that he planned for one person each day, starting with his classmates. Eri asked whether that meant she would have 18 mothers, not knowing about Nana. Deku picked her up and confirmed that she would. Eri smiled and said she wanted a brother. Deku looked at Eri and then at the other girls, who were all giving him flirtatious smiles. Gil smiled and announced that they had arrived at the restaurant. During dinner, Deku asked how they should place their orders. Gil suggested they order with the staff, and Aizawa added that Deku meant ordering based on who had feelings for him. Mina proposed that whoever had a crush on Deku go first in the planned order. They all looked to Uraraka. Momo approved the idea. Tsu encouraged Uraraka, and Uraraka blushed but agreed, asking whether they had plans for the next day. Gil explained that he and the boys had plans that evening, and Aizawa reminded Deku that he could probably manage only 3 dates a day when everything was taken into account. Deku protested that he did not expect to be that busy. The girls teased him lightly, and Aizawa warned that he would receive a lot of attention. Joke joked that she would like to see him try to keep up. Aizawa told them to wait until they returned to the hotel for more details. Deku said he did not want to hear about teachers' personal lives. Gil interrupted to say that he had ordered the food and would make a schedule for Deku's days. Aizawa insisted that Deku not go out that night, but Gil, having gone out the previous night despite a recent injury, assured them he would be fine and left to finish some tasks. After dinner, Gil changed and went out to coordinate people. Deku lay down in his room, and soon the girls came in. Mina called out to tease him about guests. Deku asked why they had come. Midnight indicated that they were there to explain the plan. Tsu said the arranged dates were for later. Deku asked whether anyone would stop the current plan. The girls said they would not. Midnight stated that they would each have private one-on-one time with him during the week in the evenings. Deku asked who would start. Momo reminded them that they were going in the order of who had a crush on him first. Uraraka and Deku remained. Deku asked if she was sure about going first. They spent private time together that evening. The specifics are omitted. The next morning, Deku came downstairs and Aizawa asked if he was all right. Deku asked whether he could borrow a sleeping bag because he had not slept the night before and needed to rest. and Aizawa checked on him. Midnight explained that the girls had been spending nights with him and intended to continue doing so. Asked jokingly about how Deku's hips were holding up. Deku admitted he did not know. Aizawa shook his head and stepped away. Gil returned and laid out the schedule, saying they could do as they liked until 5:30 because they were attending a concert at 6. Joke asked how things had gone the previous night, and Gil admitted he needed sleep. Aizawa and Deku agreed they would rest as well. Aizawa noted that Deku had not slept because he had been kept busy. Tsu shrugged that it had been worth it. Mina observed that Deku could still walk, and Deku conceded that he could more or less walk but was sore. Mirko teased that the older girls had been worn out too. Asked to stop hearing about the night's events, and Aizawa quietly agreed. The girls acquiesced. By 5:30 everyone was ready. Gil checked that everyone was present and they boarded the bus. Gil said he would be out working but would take care of things from the outside. Aizawa suggested he take a break, but Gil said there was too much to do. Deku asked what the worst that could happen would be, and Gil replied that it would probably be fine, though there was more to discuss. Gil handed Aizawa the tickets. When the bus stopped, Aizawa announced that they would get off. They left the bus. Gil changed into fresh clothes and thought about needing to find out how they were making them. Everyone walked into the concert venue. One companion, looking worried, asked what was meant by saying they could not come. Someone on the other end of the line announced they were leaving and ended the call abruptly. Deku asked if everything was okay. An unnamed band member explained that the lead singer had just left and they could not find a replacement. Jiro suggested Deku could sing for them. Deku reacted with surprise. The same band member checked whether Deku was capable, and the group behind him confirmed that he could. The drummer then introduced himself as Blade. Deku introduced himself as Deku, from Japan, a UA student and a hero in training. Blade asked if Deku would sing for the group. Aizawa approved, and AM agreed as well. Deku smiled and said he would help. Blade thanked him and invited him to meet the rest of the band. Deku nodded and said he would see them later. Blade and Deku ran off together, and Aizawa told Deku to do well. Blade returned to the others and announced that plans had changed. Deku would be the new lead singer because John had left. Jimmy, the guitarist, introduced himself and expressed frustration about John's sudden departure. Storm, the bass player, also introduced himself. Deku greeted them warmly. Storm asked if there was anything Deku could not sing. Deku said he could sing anything. Jimmy told him to say if he wanted to play something different. Deku smiled and agreed to begin. Storm mentioned Deku should change his outfit first, and Jimmy pointed out the exit out back. Deku said he would dress while the others prepared. When Deku returned, Storm complimented his appearance and Jimmy urged him to get ready. They walked onto the stage to cheers from the crowd, which fell silent when they saw Deku. Deku announced that he was not John and explained that John had left the band before the show, then urged everyone to begin. The audience cheered again as the band started to play. The crowd called for more, and Deku promised they would get more if that was what they wanted. Storm picked up a trumpet and nodded, and the band launched into another energetic set. Everyone went wild, and Deku thanked Australia, saying he would see them next time. They walked off together, and Storm handed over the band's contact card, explaining they would call if they needed help and asked the heroes to call if help was needed. Deku accepted the card and thanked her, saying he would see them around. Deku moved toward the others, and Aizawa told everyone to get ready to go. They boarded the bus, and Deku asked where Gil was. Aizawa replied that Gil would be out for a while later. Them asked when Gil would be home. The bus came to a stop just as a tiger ran down the road toward them. Gil dropped from above and sprang into action, moving with precise, anime-style speed to confront the animal and send it tumbling and off the road. The pro heroes were about to step off and assist when they saw Gil finish the encounter without fatal harm and jump onto a nearby roof. The officers who arrived asked what had happened. The police said there appeared to be a villain involved and that they would investigate, then asked if everyone was all right. Everyone nodded, and Aizawa told them to get back on the bus. Back on the bus, Aizawa texted Gil, asking what had just happened. At the barbecue place after dinner, the group talked about Gil. Am asked whether Aizawa had heard from Gil yet. Aizawa said he had not, but that he was sure Gil was fine. Midnight agreed, noting that Gil had probably handled the tiger. Aizawa clarified that his worry was something else. Later, Deku and a girl went up to his room to talk privately. Am reassured Aizawa that Gil would be fine, and Aizawa sighed and admitted the reassurance helped. They turned on the television. The news reported a recent spike in villain attacks over the past several days, forcing heroes to be more active, and said they were still searching for a vigilante known as the Dark Hood. Am noted that they were hunting him, and Aizawa said he had seen the reports. The broadcast described the Dark Hood as powerful and on the run from the heroes. The channel cut to live footage showing Gil fighting professional heroes. Everyone recognized him on screen. The report pointed out that the pros could not get close to him and were determined not to let him escape. On the footage, Gil shouted that he was doing better work than the professional heroes in the country. One pro hero said they only wanted to talk. Another warned that they would not let him get away. A third urged calm, saying their heated approach was making Gil more defensive. The first pro tried to reason with the Dark Hood and asked him to come with the police for questioning. The second insisted he would be detained, while the third argued against locking him up on the spot. Gil dropped down and agreed to go, but he added a threatening remark that made it clear he would not be easy to control. Am wondered what Gil was doing, and Aizawa explained that Gil was trying not to cause serious harm. One of the pros then thanked their colleagues and asked to stop the live cameras. The broadcast cut the cameras, and Aizawa said he wanted to see more. Elsewhere, unknown voices discussed waiting until their enemies would have to face what had been prepared for them and agreed they would deal with Gil later. The chapter ended on a cliffhanger. Pro 1 asked the newcomer to remove his mask. Gil replied that he would not. Pro 2 demanded to know why, and Pro 1 told him to leave. When Pro 2 hesitated, Gil held a pistol against his temple in a tense, anime-style standoff until Pro 2 retreated. Pro 1 protested that it had not been necessary. Gil explained that the man had been provoking him. Pro 3 then introduced a line of questioning. Gil sat and invited them to ask. Pro 1 asked why he did what he did. Gil answered that he protected those who needed protecting. Pro 3 asked whether he had ever killed anyone who was not a villain. Gil said he had not. He only took lethal action against villains who were too dangerous to be left for the legal system. Pro 1 told him his record was cleared and he was free to go. Gil agreed, on the condition that if he had followers they should not be hunted down like him and should be properly cleared instead. The pros nodded, and Pro 1 called him Dark Hood as he left. As Gil walked down the hall and vaulted over a barrier, Pro 3 and Pro 1 exchanged impressed remarks about his skill. Later, a private training session had taken place. In a separate private moment, Aizawa and Joke shared a quiet exchange. The next morning, Gil entered the kitchen in his gear. Aizawa asked whether he was heading out. Gil said he might not be coming back. Aizawa noted that Gil had been out all night. Gil said he would sleep later and urged everyone to enjoy the day at Tarona Zoo without worrying about him. Deku expressed concern about Gil's lack of sleep. Gil brushed it off, insisting he would be fine. Aizawa checked whether Gil was hurt. Gil admitted he might be, but he did not know. Joke told Aizawa to tell the kids to get ready and that she would keep an eye on Gil. Aizawa cut in and reminded them that Gil looked better than the last time. On the bus, Gil told the group to behave at the zoo and not to disturb the animals. Aizawa warned them not to do anything reckless because it would mean extra paperwork for him and more problems for Gil. Denki protested that it was not only him, and Aizawa laughed that it was fun to watch him squirm. When they arrived, Gil led the way, determined to relax for the day. At the zoo entrance, Gil changed back into his old clothes and sat on a bench, wondering what everyone else had planned. Aizawa asked how his sleep had been. Gil gave a dry answer and suggested they head back to the hotel after a while. Mina asked if they could go to the mall instead, and Gil checked that everyone agreed. They all accepted and Gil led them off. At the mall, Gil sat in the food court exhausted. Aizawa checked on him and then mentioned that he had spoken with Nizu, who had expressed interest in Gil attending UA. Aizawa had told the other teachers, and they were fine with it. Gil smiled at the offer but doubted he was the right fit, calling himself too deadly. Aizawa reassured him that he could be a different kind of hero, a guardian like the Red Hood concept, and suggested Gil could be the killing-edge vigilante turned protector for Japan. Gil asked whether the class would accept him. Aizawa laughed and said of course they would. They were a handful but they were his students. Gil asked about parental consent, and Joke and Aizawa both offered to act as guardians. Gil looked surprised at the idea of having them as parental figures, and Aizawa pointed out that their quirks and attitudes were similar, so it was not unusual. Joke teased that they both seemed perpetually in need of. Gil asked whether he would have siblings. Aizawa joked that if he meant Class 1A, then no, and Joke admitted she did not think she could handle them. Aizawa agreed that it would be chaotic. Gil accepted the arrangement and joked about taking their names, prompting light-hearted back and forth about parenting and teasing warnings to behave. Aizawa laughed and told Gil that training would be intense, and Gil accepted the challenge. Aizawa then told him that he was enrolled at UA whether he liked it or not. On the bus, Aizawa announced that he had two things to say. The first concerned Gil. News arrived that someone was coming to UA, and everyone was happy. Lita asked if a parent needed to sign them up. Gil smiled and joked that older men could handle it by pretending to be his father. Aizawa warned in his dry way that calling him old again would have consequences. Gil laughed and called him dad. Am teased that Aizawa was part of the dad gang now. Deku teased Am that he was a granddad. Eri smiled and asked what they were doing now, using a childish nickname for Deku. Deku smiled back and said they would see. Gil outlined the evening plans, explaining that they would return to the hotel and then go to a 5-star restaurant for dinner. Aizawa asked if Gil would be joining them. Gil smiled and said he would be out again. Joke wondered when he had last had dinner. Gil said it had been about a month. The group reacted with concern. Gil explained that his old class had made lunch difficult for him for a while, so he had stopped eating for a bit. Denki called that messed up and Kree said it was not cool. Aizawa noted the seriousness of the situation in his usual blunt way, and Joke agreed with concern. Gil tried to reassure them and admitted that this was one reason he had been unsure about coming to UA. Deku told him that it would be okay and that no one would be mean to him except for one person in Class 1B, but that person did not get far. Gil thanked them and insisted it would be fine. Aizawa and Joke expressed hurt at the thought that others had hurt Gil, and Gu argued that even flawed people were needed as heroes. The group's joking violence was softened into talk of confronting the problem rather than harming anyone. Aizawa finally relented. Gil told everyone to get ready to leave. After they got ready and were back on the bus, Aizawa asked Gil how he had been dealing with things. Gil said not to worry. Joke asked what he had been doing between dinners and sleep. Gil explained that he had been fighting villains and helping people in need. Mina commented that it sounded like a lot of work for him. Aizawa said he would send the others out if he could, but Nizu would not allow it. Gil assured them he had been doing this for years and had never been seriously hurt. Joke and Aizawa voiced their unhappiness at him taking such risks. Gil answered with a firm, almost stubborn line about continuing until threats were stopped, expressing his commitment to protecting others. Aizawa told him not to be reckless now that he was part of their strange family. Gil refused to promise but urged everyone to have fun. Aizawa told Gil to be safe that night, and Gil nodded. They left the bus and went into the 5-star restaurant. Them asked how everyone was liking Australia so far, and the conversation filled the table with stories. Aizawa remarked that he had gained a son and joked about his longtime partner, making Joke blush. The group laughed, and Deku shared his own surprises about family, that AM was like a father to him and that he had found a lovely daughter and family connections in the strange way their lives had folded together. Eri said she had thought she was Deku's daughter. Deku affectionately patted her head and called her his little snowball. Koda asked about the son-in-law reference, and Deku smiled and teased that Koda was the one he had in mind, claiming he understood the feelings between Koda and Eri and that he accepted their relationship in principle. Koda and Eri turned red. AM became emotional at the thought of being a grandfather, and Deku laughed and reminded him to wait until UA before getting too excited. Deku then lightened the moment with a reminder that some things had to wait until after UA, making sure everyone understood that major life decisions would come later. Eri blushed and told him to stop teasing. Deku noticed Koda lying on the ground and hurried over to check on him. Koda, still recovering and a little dazed, asked if he and Eri should be together. Eri froze and turned red, then responded shyly in a way that made everyone fall silent. Deku asked Eri what she had said. Them watched from the side and thought that Koda had definitely taken after his mother. Eri admitted that Bakugo had been the one to say those things. Aizawa warned everyone to stay calm and not to take matters into violence. Deku shot Aizawa a warning look but agreed. He told Eri that they would not use that language and that he would make sure Bakugo did not say anything like that around her again. At the laboratory, Gil stood by a row of Nomu and tried to piece together what the villains were planning. He overheard Toga insisting she did not know the details, while Shigaraki grew impatient and demanded answers. Dabi snapped back that finding villains and making plans was harder than it looked. Kurojairi urged everyone to calm down as new arrivals entered. Clint and Rose led the group in revealing a project, a single, more powerful Nomu assembled with multiple quirks, intended to be their ultimate tool. They explained that several bodies had been prepared as components, and that Mineta held a key role in the center of the experiment. Clint and Rose toasted to their ambition, promising domination, and the others echoed the sentiment. Gil disliked the plan and voiced his disapproval. The villains turned on him and ordered their guards to capture or kill him. Chaos erupted. Gil drew his weapon and fired at Kurojire's portal apparatus to disrupt the formation. Dabi answered with a blaze of fire that forced Gil to dodge. Toga lunged forward and landed rapid, aggressive strikes to prevent his escape, and Shigaraki unleashed his decay-like ability to destabilize the surrounding equipment. The fight played out like a fast, brutal anime battle. Explosions of energy, sudden bursts of power, and desperate maneuvers as Gil fought to break free. He managed to create enough space to return fire, striking Dabi in the legs and disrupting Toga, and he pushed past Shigaraki with a final burst before retreating. Gil vowed that they would see one another again, and then he disappeared into the night. Back at the hotel in Aizawa's room, Joke expressed her happiness that they had taken Gil in, and Aizawa brushed a hand over her head in a quiet moment of gratitude. A sudden crash through the window shattered that calm. Gil stumbled inside, breathing heavily and clearly badly hurt. Aizawa sprang to his side, stunned by the sight. Joke urged Gil to go to the hospital, but Gil refused. He said they did not have time for that while the enemies were still active. Everyone crowded around. Am asked what had happened. Gil removed part of his helmet to reveal his exhaustion and said that the League of Villains and their allies had appeared, plans had changed and they needed to move west immediately. Momo quickly prepared first aid supplies and Aizawa wrapped provisional bandages as best he could. Deku worried aloud whether the hero unit had been involved. Gil sighed and reassured them that the hero unit was not responsible, but warned that they needed to prepare. Aizawa asked Gil to explain. Gil slammed his fist on a table in frustration and announced that the League of Villains were assembling something catastrophic. He clarified that it was worse than any previous threat. They were creating an unprecedented Nomu by combining quirks and elements from the hero unit, all for one overhaul, Shigaraki, Stain, Muscular, and others, with Mineta used as the central component. The group listened in growing horror. Joke tried to steady the conversation and reminded everyone to take things one step at a time, starting with proper medical care for Gil. Gil insisted he was fine and that the priority was evacuation. Everyone needed to return to Japan by the next afternoon. Aizawa asked what would become of Gil. Gil replied that he would stay behind to ensure everyone else could get away safely. Deku protested that they were not leaving, but Gil pointed out that if there were any League involvement, the students would be sent home for their safety. Niza confirmed by phone that, sadly, they all needed to come back by tomorrow afternoon. Gil promised he would be fine and would rejoin them when his work was done. Aizawa urged him again not to dismiss the danger and demanded that he come with them, but Gil looked down and said he could not. He had a mission to complete, and if it cost him his life, he accepted that. Aizawa pleaded with him, insisting that death was not something to treat lightly and that he should not go it alone. Nizu told the group that they could not go with the rescue team. Aizawa protested loudly that this made no sense, but Nizu explained that the priority was to get everyone else back to safety. Gil sighed and volunteered to hold the enemies off until the others were clear. Joke warned that Gil might die, and Gil smiled, acknowledging that it was the plan. Deku insisted on staying with him, but Nizu replied that the children needed Deku the most. Gil agreed that Deku should go. He believed the enemies wanted him more than anyone else and that he could act as a distraction. AM warned that it was not a good plan, and Gil admitted it was risky but said it offered the best chance to protect the others. Aizawa reminded Gil of what the attackers had done to him the night before, and Gil said he was ready. Joke pointed out the danger of a Nomu, and Gil brushed it off, suggesting the Nomu might be aimed at Deku instead. Deku resolved to stay and fight, but Nizu insisted everyone return and set up a defensive line. Gil argued he knew the terrain better than anyone. Kree and Denki refused to leave him, calling him brother, and Aizawa agreed with their loyalty while telling Gil to make sure he was right and to fall back behind them when the time came. Joke swore in jest that if Gil died he would come back after him. AM asked when they would leave, and Nizu said the earliest departure would be tomorrow afternoon. Gil nodded and said they should pack while he got a new mask. Aizawa asked his son to come with them and pleaded for safety. Gil reassured his father that he had it under control, and Joke urged him to be safe. Gil hugged both of them and promised he would be all right. In the morning, everyone woke and boarded the bus. Gil smiled and told the group they were headed to the Sydney Opera House. He explained they would look around, return to the hotel, and then the others would go home. Am sighed and said they were worried despite knowing the plan, and Gil smiled again, telling them not to worry because he had everything in hand. Deku suggested that someone should stay behind, and Gil said if anyone had to, it should not be Deku or any of the younger kids. Aizawa threatened, half joking, that if anyone tried to miss the plane he would throw them on board. When they arrived, they entered the theater area. The woman at the front desk welcomed them and confirmed they were in room 4, where a movie would start soon and snacks would be served during the screening. Gil led the group inside. Later, the front desk worker returned to the back office, where Toga said the situation with the kids felt wrong. Dabi admitted the concern but asked what they could do. Toga resolved that they should save the children and take on Shigaraki. Dabi grinned and agreed that it sounded like a plan. Gil announced to the group that some heroes were coming to speak with them. Deku marveled at how amazing the venue looked, and Gil said they could talk until the heroes arrived. M pulled Gil aside to ask about his plan, and Aizawa also asked for details. Gil sighed and reassured them that he had a strategy. Tiger offered help in a fight, but Gil insisted that the rest of them needed to go home. He asked if Rag Doll had brought protective equipment, and Tiger confirmed she had, to be safe. AM said she had also prepared supplies. Gil asked Aizawa if he still had his capture device, and Aizawa confirmed that he did. Gil guessed that the pro heroes had their own gear ready as well. The group nodded and returned to the screening area. Deku asked which heroes were coming. Gil estimated about 5, though he did not know their names. Kree expressed excitement, and Gil asked to take a photo of the group. Joke asked whether Gil had brought any weapons. Gil explained he would not be carrying lethal weapons in public after what had happened the night before and preferred to keep non-lethal equipment on him at all times for protection. Joke worried about the possibility of younger children getting access to dangerous gear, and Gil said he would focus on teaching safety rather than handing out weapons. Aizawa laughed quietly at the chaotic conversation, while Joke insisted the youngest children would never be given anything dangerous. Gil promised they would address it later. The conversation then drifted to a hypothetical. Gil imagined an alternate world where everyone from their class had become villains instead of heroes. Aizawa asked what he meant. Momo described the idea as a kind of multiverse where roles were reversed. Gil painted a picture of Deku as a criminal mastermind and other classmates taking on darker paths. Deku questioned why he would be a mastermind, and Gil explained that if Deku had not become a hero, his determination and intelligence might have made him feared in another life. The others speculated about who would teach or oppose such a Deku in that world. AM said she could see the scenario, and Gu joked about mentoring someone who had become the #1 villain. AM reacted in surprise. Deku asked who would be the #1 hero if their world were inverted, and Gil suggested the villains from their reality would be the heroes in that alternate place. Aizawa mused that their class would be both feared and pitted in such a world, having to contend with the consequences of 2 different realities. Deku shivered at the thought of them as villains, and Kree agreed it was a frightening idea. Denki added that it was a relief they were who they were now. They continued to chat quietly as the movie began, the group settling into the room and the brief respite allowing them a moment of ordinary calm before the difficult decisions and the coming confrontation. Aizawa noted that they had not been attacked yet. He warned Denki to be quiet and threatened to shoot him if he did not. Joke questioned Aizawa, asking if he would really shoot Denki, and Aizawa replied that if he had a gun he might, but there was no hole in Denki yet. Deku insisted that no one would shoot Denki. Gil thought the situation felt wrong. The heroes should have been here by now and there were no villain reports. He looked around, saw red lights everywhere, and heard a ticking noise. Aizawa asked if Gil was okay. Gil shouted for everyone to get down because there were bombs. Everyone hit the ground as explosions rocked the area. Debris and shrapnel sent people tumbling and many were injured. Gil helped lift Deku and Aizawa and ordered them to aid the injured. He told Deku to make an opening in the back wall while he held the line. Deku scanned the scene for villains and argued that Gil could not face so many foes alone. Gil ordered everyone to evacuate and insisted that Aizawa go. Deku hesitated, but Aizawa cut him off and told him to help get people to safety, promising they would see Gil later. Gil nodded and promised to give maximum effort. Time seemed to stutter for a moment when Deadpool walked through, grumbled about a stolen line, and then walked off. Aizawa wondered what that meant but urged everyone to keep moving. Aizawa and Deku ran to help the injured while Gil put on his new helmet and drew his gun. The group moved toward the exit while AM, Ragdoll, Midnight, Joke, and Aizawa kept firing at the villains and the other pros used their quirks. A taunting voice told the heroes that the attackers had come for only 2 people and that after those 2 were taken, the heroes could rest. Deku dropped down defiantly and challenged them. Gil ordered everyone to get out, insisting he would handle the attackers. Deku protested that everyone was doing fine, but Gil opened fire to buy time and urged them to go now. AM insisted they had to leave immediately, and Deku pleaded that Gil needed help. Aizawa directed Deku to focus on evacuating people and told him to go. Deku ran back to lead the retreat. As everyone passed through the opening and reached safety, Deku turned to seal the exit and re-enter. Aizawa asked where Deku had gone. When the others looked back, AM said Deku had gone back inside to clear the exit, and Aizawa panicked. Ambulances, police, and more pro-heroes arrived and AM declared they needed to get back in. Gil realized that once the others were gone, it was just him against the villains. Shigaraki announced that once he finished with Gil, the class would die. Gil vowed not to go down without a fight. Shigaraki ordered a Nomu with 10 arms and towering height to kill him. Deku dropped back in and refused to leave Gil, insisting on staying to help. Shigaraki commanded the Nomu to attack others as well. Gil demanded that everyone go and began shooting at the villains while Deku insisted he would not abandon Gil. Gil told Deku to go, Japan needed him. Deku refused. Gil reloaded and explained he would use his full power and that Deku would need his strength for later. All for One urged them to hurry, and Deku glared at him. All for One refused to fight Deku in his current form and called Shigaraki over. Shigaraki replied that he was ready. Deku ran to intervene as Shigaraki ordered the Nomu to stop him. Gil shot the Nomu and told it to stand down. All for One placed a hand on Shigaraki and a red energy began to emanate from them. All for One collapsed. Shigaraki vowed to carry on his master's will. Deku swore he would give everything and prepared to push his limits. Gil, watching Deku, resolved to unleash his own fierce power. Both powered up intensely. Deku adopted an appearance reminiscent of the moment he had once saved Eri, his hair paling, and he issued a fierce challenge. Shigaraki screamed for the Nomu to kill Deku while he handled the others. Deku and Shigaraki collided in a relentless barrage of blows, trading punches like a storm. The Nomu's cries drew Gil's attention. He set aside his guns, drew a scythe wreathed in dark flame, and engaged the Nomu. The Nomu hurled a heavy strike that Gil parried. He managed to sever one of its hands. The hand regenerated, but Gil kept fighting. The Nomu grabbed him and shouted for Deku to finish the job. Deku and Shigaraki paused. Toga warned Shigaraki that they should stop because the heroes might win. Dabi agreed that retreat was necessary. Shigaraki refused and struck them both down, knocking them out. Deku challenged Shigaraki to keep coming. As Deku and Shigaraki exchanged devastating blows, Gil was driven into the ground several times but kept rising. He broke a punch and declared the enemy finished. Gil began to grow in size, matching the Nomu, and their clashes made the ground tremble. Gil thought about needing a last resort but knew he had to. Get Deku out first. Deku, battered but resolute, shouted for everyone to get out now and pushed his power further, calling forth a massive surge of energy. His hair darkened and gray as he unleashed that technique against Shigaraki. Gil feared Deku might fall and decided the Nomu had to be removed from the fight. He seized the Nomu, wrenching it off balance, gripped a leg, spun it like a tether, and threw it with such force that it flew high into the sky and vanished into space. Everyone watching stared in stunned silence. AM asked if that had really been the Nomu, and Aizawa agreed that it must have been. Deku spoke in a tired tone. Gil ordered the others to deal with the rest. Deku insisted everyone get out, but Gil insisted he could handle it. When Deku refused, Gil sighed, apologized, and then grabbed Deku, Toga, and Dabi before throwing them outside. They landed in the street and Deku scrambled to his feet, determined to go back inside, but a glowing red barrier sealed the building. Aizawa asked what was happening. Deku looked up and explained that Shigaraki had returned with far more power than before. Am realized with dread who Deku meant. Back inside, Gil shrank back to a more normal stature and demanded to know where the hero unit was. The hero unit revealed herself behind him. Gil fired without hesitation, neutralizing her. He turned to the remaining leader and spoke of finishing things, but the leader declared they would not go down without a fight. Shigaraki interjected, refusing to let them die quietly. Gil boasted that he had already dealt with one of Shigaraki's Nomu and could do it again. Shigaraki replied that what they had seen was only a weaker vision and ordered Kurogiri to bring the death Nomu. Gil reacted with frustration and fired repeatedly at the leader until the threat was ended. Outside, Aizawa urged Deku to go to the hospital. Am warned that Deku had pushed himself too far, but Deku shook off the concern and said he needed to get past the barrier to help. Everyone stared at the red field, and Aizawa wondered who had created it. Inside the building, Gil told Shigaraki to let them finish. Shigaraki taunted him and reached out. His touch began to corrupt Gil's guns. Gil dropped them and produced a scythe instead. Shigaraki grabbed the weapon, trying to disarm him, but Gil's eyes darkened and a fierce resolve took over. He struck Shigaraki with a powerful blow, forcing Shigaraki to demand the Nomu be brought forward. Kurogiri warped open a space and the death Nomu dropped into the room, an enormous, many-armed behemoth that filled the area. Gil raised his hands and a red energy began to shimmer around him. Shigaraki ordered the Nomu to kill Gil. Outside, Toga noted that the Nomu they had seen in space had been a weaker version. Deku remembered that the previous Nomu had been defeated, and everyone heard the terrifying scream echoing from inside. The barrier collapsed, and Deku ran back toward the battle despite AM's anguished cries and Aizawa's orders to stay back. Deku dropped into the fray and announced that he would stop Shigaraki. He activated an immense surge of one-for-all power that incorporated the spirit quirks the engine of his rampage had granted him. Nana explained that one of the spirit quirks allowed the user to float. Another user described a Grim Reaper-like ability that made someone feel as if death were near without actually killing them. A third produced a fireball quirk that could form flames in the hand and launch them outward. A fourth revealed a quirk that stoked anger without draining stamina, and another spoke of a werewolf transformation that enhanced strength and hearing. Using them together, Deku began to float, formed fire in his hands, harnessed the intimidating presence of the Grim Reaper effect, felt a surge of controlled rage, and gained heightened strength and senses from the wolf aspect. Deku and Shigaraki exchanged heavy blows, each testing the other as Shigaraki unleashed every quirk in his body. Gil, meanwhile, decided to use his scythe in earnest. He moved his arm out and the ground cracked beneath him, glowing red as a pool of energy surfaced. He shaped that energy into a weapon and met the Noma head-on, blocking a colossal punch. With a dramatic, sweeping motion, Gil's scythe cleaved through the Nomu, breaking it apart in a burst of destructive force that scattered its form and ended its assault in an anime-style display of power. Shigaraki ordered any remaining Nomu to finish Deku, but there were none left. Gil had already destroyed them. Enraged and disbelieving, Shigaraki could not accept being pushed back. Gil told Deku to leave. This fight was his to finish, but Deku refused to abandon him. In the chaos, Shigaraki reached toward Deku, attempting to use his decay on him. Gil teleported into the path of that touch to shield Deku. Though the contact harmed Gil, he forced a smile and told Deku it would be all right. With a sudden, decisive strike of his scythe, Gil incapacitated Shigaraki and ended the threat. Moments later, several gunshots rang out as reinforcements moved to secure the scene. Deku, exhausted and breathing heavily, declared that Shigaraki was finished and that he should be allowed to rest. Gil, battered but standing, asked if anyone had a mask he could use to cover his face. When Deku had none, a mask materialized in Gil's hands. He donned it and, steadier now, asked Deku if he was all right. Deku powered down, drained from channeling so much power, and assured Gil he was tired but okay. Gil checked on him and asked if he could walk. Deku nodded, and together they left the building. Deku told the arriving heroes that the situation was under control now. The League of Villains was gone. Police, FBI, the army, and the pro-heroes arrived to assess the wreckage. Gil closed his eyes and told the others that the villains were gone now and asked that they rest. Aizawa peered down at something with growing concern and asked if this was what he thought it was. Gil began to speak but faltered and collapsed. Deku reacted and then fainted. Am rushed forward and called Deku his boy. Both Deku and Gil were rushed to the hospital and placed under induced medical comas. 4 hours later both awoke and were placed on 24-hour observation with hourly checks. Inko flew over to see Deku, and Im took a seat by his bed, quietly telling the young man that he had done well. Aizawa sat beside Gil while a doctor explained that Gil had survived but remained in critical condition. His body was failing slowly and he had suffered serious damage to his heart and other vital systems. The doctor was frank that Gil's time was uncertain. Aizawa asked if they could stay with him, and the doctor agreed. Joke slipped into tears at the news. Aizawa comforted him, urging him to hang on to hope and pleading that Gil not give up. Aizawa held the grieving friend and tried to soothe him so that he could rest. In Deku's room Aim kept encouraging him, talking about strength and recovery. A doctor then entered and asked whether AM wanted the bad news or the good first. AM asked for the bad news. The doctor replied that Gil's condition was critical. AM braced himself and then asked for the good news. The doctor explained that Deku would make a full recovery from his injuries, though he would need time to regain his strength and recover from several broken bones. AM left the room to tell the others that Deku was okay for now and that they should return to the hotel until he woke. Mina and the others crowded around wanting to know more. AM reassured them that Deku was fine in a medical coma and that he would announce when Deku woke. Jiro asked about Gil, who had been down for a long time. AM hesitated, offering to tell them when they were ready. Mirko urged the group to return to the hotel so those who had been training could rest. Mirio and Eri shared a quiet goodbye to Deku before the others boarded the bus. On the bus the conversation grew tense. Kree began to voice concerns that the pro-heroes did not want to hear in front of children, and Midnight cut him off, insisting they not finish that thought. Denki suggested they should do something for Gil, but Mirko threatened him jokingly and Midnight tried to hold the group to a calmer perspective, arguing that Aizawa and Joke needed to be the ones informed first. Some argued that they were adults and the stakes were especially heavy because 2 heroes in training were in medical comas. MT Lady sighed and reminded them that the students were facing dangers the adult pros were meant to handle. Denki said that heroes fought regardless of fear. Midnight said that the situation was dangerous and that the students had already pushed themselves too far during their first year of training. The bus ride back to the hotel was quiet. Inside Deku's mind, Nana spoke to him gently, confirming that the great threat had been defeated and that Deku would retain the power he carried. She warned him that even though the power remained, Gil was in danger. Deku protested that Gil had done so much and could not be lost. Nana assured him that Gil had earned peace, then faded. In a private part of his own mind, Gil accepted what had happened and felt a heavy weariness. A shadowed presence told him that everyone was finally free, and Gil smiled, asking only to see Deku once more if he could. The presence allowed it. A shimmering ring of light transported Gil into Deku's mind, and Nana welcomed him with surprise. Deku ran to Gil and embraced him, saying he had feared Gil had died. Gil said he might still live if he chose to, and he urged Deku to live for Aizawa and Joke, who deserved to be happy. Gil promised they would see each other again soon and faded back to his own place. Back in the real world, Aizawa stayed up through the night watching Gil while Joke rested on his lap. AM entered and asked Aizawa if he could speak with him privately. Outside, AM apologized. Aizawa told him it was not his fault and that he was also worried about Deku. AM explained that Deku would be fine until his mother arrived. The bigger concern was Gil's condition. Aizawa admitted that it was what frustrated him most. AM offered to help in any way he could, and Aizawa thanked him, asking AM to return to Deku's side. When Aizawa returned to the room, he let out a curse under his breath. Joke chastised him for the language, and Aizawa sank down beside him. He asked Joke how much time they might have. Joke estimated that tomorrow afternoon might be it. Aizawa agreed and urged Joke to try to sleep. Joke lay down, whispered good night to Aizawa, and rested. The hospital remained quiet as the night stretched on, everyone waiting and hoping for whatever fate might bring. Aizawa and Joke woke to find Gil in bed. Aizawa asked how Joke had slept. Joke smiled and said she had slept fine and asked Aizawa the same. Aizawa replied that he had slept not too badly, and Gil added that he had not slept too poorly either. Aizawa and Joke exclaimed with relief that Gil was alive and not in a coma. Gil turned his head and explained that although he was alive, it had come at a cost. They noticed that Gil's eye was entirely black. Joke reacted with concern. Gil reassured them that it was fine and that he could still see through it. Aizawa asked why Gil's eye looked that way now. Gil explained with a tired smile that he had made a bargain with a powerful being and had lost his eye in the process. Joke repeated the guess that he had made a deal with a dark ruler. At that moment, a presence manifested beside them and confirmed that Gil's account was true. Aizawa reacted in disbelief and asked whether this being was there to harm them. Gil explained that the presence was mostly in his head and not directly harmful most of the time. Aizawa asked if Gil had saved his son, and the presence said it owed him a favor. Gil went on to explain that after a terrible PRD, he had been to a nightmarish place briefly and returned with strange powers as a result. Aizawa and Joke could hardly believe it. The being said it had to leave and slipped back into Gil's mind. Gil confirmed that it was the voice he heard inside his head. Aizawa wondered aloud what the doctors would say, since everyone believed Gil was meant to be dying. A doctor entered the room, astonished to find Gil alive. The doctor explained that Deku had woken up unexpectedly and that Gil had been expected not to survive, yet here he was with a darkened eye. Gil offered a wry remark about how intense that other place had been, and the doctor left, muttering that he needed a break. Aizawa urged Gil to stop scaring everyone, and Gil resolved to tell others he was not dead. At another bedside, Deku awoke and asked his father what was happening. Am said that he had expected Deku to be asleep longer. Deku explained that he had kept a transformation active while in the coma to speed his healing. Am acknowledged this and said Deku should be fine until his mother arrived. The door was kicked open and Inko burst in, demanding to talk to her son and telling him to be quiet. She walked over to Deku and warned that she intended to give him a long talk. Deku nodded and accepted it. Inko asked Am to fetch something to help them rest, then launched into a 2-hour-long, earnest conversation with Deku that left everyone emotionally raw. Deku apologized afterward, and Inko softened into tears of relief. Am suggested they go get lunch, and Inko agreed. Later, Aizawa ended a phone call and sighed, relieved. Joke asked what they should have for lunch. Gil said he would like a burger, and Aizawa agreed that it would be easy to get. In the class common area, Twilight Becky Midnight finished a call and relayed the news that Aizawa and Gil were alive, though Gil had narrowly escaped death with otherworldly aid. Denki and Mina reacted with confusion. Mirko told everyone to pack up, they were heading home the next night, and the class agreed. 4 years later, Deku stepped onto a stage to accept recognition as the #1 hero and the symbol of hope. He thanked everyone who had helped him achieve it. He joked about how Aizawa had always been hard on him. Aizawa admitted he had, and Deku thanked him for being an excellent teacher despite the tough approach. Deku also thanked his mother, Inko, for standing by him through thick and thin, and he acknowledged that tears were a normal part of their family's emotional life. He turned to Class 1A and expressed gratitude for being the best classmates and friends he could have had, even when they had exasperated Aizawa during their first year. He then asked the women who had supported him through injuries and recovery to stand. They rose and came onto the stage, and Deku told them that they had made him the happiest person alive and that he hoped they would continue to stand by his side. Gil made an inappropriate joke that was quickly shut down by Joke, who lightly struck him and scolded him for his manners. Aizawa grumbled but allowed the moment to remain joyful. Deku then asked several close friends and mentors to join him on stage as his companions for the celebration. The boys from Class 1A, Aizawa, Hawks, Tiger, and AM all came forward. Deku said they were his best men. Aizawa teased that of course he would be one, and Joke playfully told him to be happy he had a role to play. Some older students jokingly called Joke a second mother, which moved her to tears of happiness. Aizawa comforted her, and Deku suggested they take a photo to capture the moment. 6 months later, before another important ceremony, Deku stood in a suit and checked his appearance. Shoto urged him to stop fussing and get moving. Aizawa told him he looked fine and reminded him that everyone was waiting. Them smiled and told Deku he looked great and to be confident as they prepared to proceed. Deku looked around and asked where Gil was. Aizawa assured everyone that they were simply making sure everything was okay. AM added that they were checking that nothing was wrong. Deku confirmed that was fine for the rest of the preparations. AM reiterated that they were making sure everything was secure. Deku wondered if that was the same thing Gil was doing. Aizawa explained that Gil was specifically checking for bombs and villains. Deku reacted with surprise, and Aizawa reassured him that Gil was ready. AM said Gil was already in his suit. Deku relaxed a little at that. Shoto mentioned he had seen Gil in army-style gear and asked if that was an issue. Aizawa said it was Gil's suit and there was no need to worry. Deku exclaimed in disbelief when Gil entered wearing the gear. Gil reported that there were no bombs or villains nearby. Deku asked where Gil's formal suit was, and Gil said it was underneath the protective gear. Deku worried that the heavy gear might be dangerous for a wedding. Gil took off the outer layer and explained that he had brought only one weapon for protection. Deku told him not to worry and that no one was expected to attack the wedding. AM noted that, as the #1 hero, Deku could be a target. Shoto reminded everyone that loved ones were present. Aizawa agreed they had a point. Deku pointed out that this was a wedding for pro-heroes, so there would be heroes everywhere and there was little to fear. Gil said it was time to go to the ceremony. Deku agreed and asked if Gil had his lines. Gil dismissed the idea of lines and called it doing things in his own way. At the wedding, Deku walked down the center aisle accompanied by AM and Inko, while Gil stood at the front to officiate. Gil opened the ceremony with a warm, if slightly awkward, speech about the couple's history and the strength of their commitment. Deku affirmed his vows, and the partners affirmed theirs as well. Gil pronounced them married and invited them to share a respectful, celebratory kiss. Aizawa was asked to prepare refreshments for the guests. The brides moved forward and kissed Deku in a tender, joyful moment. Suddenly, someone burst through a window and declared an intent to harm Deku. Gil activated his suit and shifted into a defensive, imposing form. A sudden skirmish unfolded in a flurry of motion, gunfire and bold maneuvering with heroes and security responding. Gil moved decisively and subdued the attacker in a swift, non-graphic confrontation. After the commotion, Gil checked that everyone was safe and gave the all-clear. Deku noted that someone had tried to ruin the wedding, but everyone managed to continue the celebration. Gil confirmed the danger had passed, and the guests returned to the festivities. 6 years later, Deku entered a room filled with friends and family and welcomed everyone. He thanked them for coming and reminded them that it had been 10 years since their trip to Australia, where they had met Gil. He noted that Aizawa had helped bring Gil into their lives, that he had begun dating his wonderful partners, and that the threats they had faced had been overcome. The guests cheered and mingled, and Deku reflected on how far he had come. He remembered being quirkless, bullied, and friendless, and he thought about becoming the #1 hero, stopping bullies and villains, and gaining friends and purpose. He believed he had made a difference, and that had always been what he wanted. The end. Deku smiled and said he knew a good choice for Tro. Deku sighed and said he would pick a few more, then named Pixie Bob and Sing, admitting he worried Sing might be upset. Deku considered a dramatic number for Ragdoll and another emotional song about endings. Deku smiled and thought Mandalay would fit one song well. Deku smiled and decided a song would suit Tiger perfectly. Deku smiled again and chose a tune for Miss Joke. Deku sighed and added May to the list. Deku thought of one more and settled on Nijire. Deku called out to the crowd to see who wanted more. Everyone cheered, and Jimmy urged the band to go on. After the song, the audience shouted for an encore. Deku told the crowd that this would be the last one before a break. The band nodded and began to play. When it ended, Deku promised they would be back soon. Backstage, Storm praised the performance and told Deku it had been amazing. Jimmy said Deku had done really well. Deku chuckled softly and thanked his friends. Blade told him he was great and that if he were not a hero he could be a full-time singer. Deku sighed and said that if they moved to Japan maybe he could do both. Storm said they had thought about moving, but warned that being both a hero and a singer would be too much work. Deku smiled and asked about their quirks. Storm explained that she could summon storms. Blade said he could turn anything into blades. Jimmy said he could form any gun. Deku told them he thought that was really cool. Jimmy smiled at the compliment. Deku nodded and told them it was time to go back on stage. Deku announced that they would continue the show. On a rooftop, Gil watched and thought they were doing well. He decided to text Aizawa to say he would not be back until late and that the dinner venue was a barbecue place. Aizawa replied that he was not happy about Gil staying out late but accepted it for now and that dinner would be easy. Gil smiled and told himself it was time to find out what was happening below. Deku introduced the final number by thanking Australia for letting them play and noting they were out of time. The crowd again called for another song. Deku looked to the band to make sure they were okay. They all nodded. Deku announced that they would do one last song for the night and led them back on stage.